And we are recording. It's going. Hello, I am Chris Hanna again. This is another podcast by Chris Hanna on Chris Hanna's channel for now. So far, I don't know if we'll switch it around. You might have seen me on some other podcast that got some views, and that's the only way you might have possibly seen me before. So you might not have ever seen me, which is fine. I was on Jonathan Streeter's podcast for Thinker of Thoughts, a podcast in the ex-Mormon community, and the Midnight Mormons podcast, a podcast in the I guess you'd call it pro-Mormon community. And maybe you found me through there. On those podcasts, I talk about certain types of cultural issues around the Mormon and ex-Mormon community. And this is going to be continuing that on that show. And in my own podcast recently, I talked about my friend Flip a couple times because Flip and I, well, just yesterday, I went over the whole bigot and the bigot redefinition thing, and Flip has been one of the main persons. I think he's not even on Facebook anymore because he's not allowed to be there
No,
for multiple. Go
I
ahead.
mean, I got a 7-day ban and quit. Like, I just logged in today for the first time in months to see what happened, to see if anything happened. Like, and I'm not gonna go back. There's nothing
So
there.
Flip and I have been declared trolls
Oh yeah, that's I'm a troll.
many times in the past, and I don't think we've ever actually been trolls because we know what the actual definition of troll is, and troll
Yeah,
is usually when you say like a point that you maybe don't necessarily mean, but you're just trying to get a reaction. And we've never once done that.
uh,
We've only been disagreeers or
trolls don't use their real names.
yeah, there's that too. But no, none of the points we've ever gotten in trouble for around the ex-Mormon community or banned or declared wrong thinkers for was ever once trying to just get a reaction. There were sometimes I certainly knew a reaction would come,
Yeah.
but no, it was never for that reason. It was for the idea or the point. And
When it's hilarious that for many of these people, for them, they actually believe in going out and provoking the reaction.
for
Like that
sure,
for them, it's okay. In fact, it's a noble endeavor that righteous people should participate in. Like that's what pussy hats are for.
yeah.
Like you're trying to get the reaction. Like, and I'm not saying you're wrong
Yeah.
to
Well,
do that.
I think it's pretty safe to say that Flip and I have only ever been poking around trying to find truth. I think that's all it's ever
Oh
been and
yeah.
all we've ever been
No, like,
doing.
yeah, the accusation that I'm just ever there to cause trouble or stir up shit or any of that crap is just a lie. Um,
So Flip here is actually he was on something that might have had more views than the podcast I was on recently. Flip was actually a on a couple panels in the past on the Mormon Expression. If that old archive's available now through Mormon Stories. Flip is on a couple of the Mormon Expression panels, I think once or
I
twice.
I did I think I did half a dozen or more. I
More?
thought
Oh, I didn't know it was, I thought it was like two
I
or
I
three.
think I probably got, but I don't know, between 6 and 10. I don't really know, but it was more than 2. I know that I did a
There
few.
a couple of those I could have been on and I turned it down. I was there and I like if I didn't know the general story that was going on, I didn't want to try to comment on it because they'd be usually be talking about some sort of weird historical thing. And at that time frame, I hadn't read all the different historical things. I probably could have just still just jumped on, but um,
Yeah.
I felt like you got to know the story if you're going to be on the panel, you know. But I know a lot of them now, although that stuff, a lot of the ancient Mormon history started kind of getting boring to me some years back. I don't know how much you still go over some of
But
it.
by ancient Mormon history, you mean the Bloggernacle circa 2004?
Yeah, that the whole. I mean, some of it still comes up. I mean, one of the things we're going to be criticizing is some of the recent John Larson and John DeLynn videos where they're getting back into some of those things. I think John Larson kind of always takes the angle, although Mormon Expression wasn't always that he's going to be somebody who's exposing some of the history of the church that you don't know about. And I mean, I appreciate it. I still appreciate it now, even when they do it, even though there's one of the reasons we're here commenting is that there's always a political slant in it.
Yeah. John Larson's historical analysis is always great. He does a great job. In fact, actually just thinking about it, it's like James Lindsay's when he talks about Marx. Like, Marx looking backward, good job. Marx looking forward, bad job. That's things like, yeah, John Larson looking backward at Mormon history, good job. You
Well,
know,
I've actually curved off of that a little bit. I mean, I thought he was definitely entertaining over the years. I'd have to go re-listen to Mormon Expression stuff because I don't think he was that political back in the Mormon Expression
no, he
time.
never was. No,
He
I
might have been. I mean, we didn't
he
really think that.
the way I recall, it seemed to me that John did a good job of, if he had politics, he wasn't bringing them into it. Like, because I remember him making one or two little pokes at feminism back in the time when you could still get away with that. Um,
Well, now I don't think not only would he not do that now, he
well, he'd be ended. He
not beyond any. I think he'd kind of like mouth some of the things that he used to maybe disagree with, and
Yeah,
now.
no, I mean, I think, no, it's obvious to me that I think he's adopted a lot of stuff that I think back then he didn't hold that idea. I mean, I don't really know, but yeah, like, because that's one of the things I always respected about him, was that despite all of the political back and forth, I thought that his analysis was always pretty good. He did a pretty good job of pointing out when it was silly either way. But
So I think in general he's pretty good. He's always kind of interesting. I'm starting to think because with a lot of these different issues, same goes for Lindsay Hansen Park. I've got a lot of history with her. I go way back. I can show the screenshot I have of her thanking me as one of the first persons that she came out to as an ex Mormon, or she might not have even
yeah,
been an ex Mormon yet. I
well,
think
she's still a Mormon. Haven't you heard? She still tweets about my fellow Latter Day Saints.
I
She
didn't know
still
that.
calls herself a Latter Day Saint. Last time I checked, which was just a few weeks ago, she still
I
calls herself a
barely
Latter
keep
Day
up with that. So I went and I grew up in the
Saint.
same ward with Lindsay. It was the same ward that Lance Allred was in, although it wasn't. Lance didn't really go to that ward because Lance was part of I don't know if at that time, but like he came from that polygamous family, and so like they didn't go to the same
Yeah,
church as us, and so that it's kind of like a weird place to be. But Lindsay and I were pretty good friends. Um, I even supported her quite a bit through the Year of Polygamy podcast. But a lot of the stuff I'm starting to realize much in like a 1619 project way, and I think Larson's guilty of it too, is that for activism's sake, some of the stuff that sounds like pretty good history probably isn't. It's got activistic angles to it that adds a narrative that wasn't there. You know.
yeah, that's
Um,
always the risk.
well, I've noticed it, especially some of the things recently. Like I'd call some of his more recent dives into history, I would call them like a historical reading of, not a historical, a Marxist
Yeah,
reading of this situation. And the same way you used to see people take like a Marxist lens to something in graduate school, like I'm going to do a Marxist reading of, um, I
yeah.
don't
No,
know what, Shakespeare or something like that. He's
I
doing a
definitely,
Marxist reading of the Willie Hand Cart Company.
I definitely see what you're talking about now. Like, it's in recent times, it's obvious that he's grinding a particular axe in certain ways. Yeah,
Well, the way I say like 1619 project is like a lot of what the error in the 1619 project was imagining up what some people must have thought that just wasn't a part of the time frame at all.
yeah.
And
It's mind reading. Yeah,
so you
total
put
mind
into
reading.
these mind reading things, and I know that sort of historiography. I know Lindsay Hanson Park does that a lot in her
Yeah,
storytelling, history telling, and I'd have to like there's like a lot of little claims that maybe I will, and I told you the other day to like take way too much time, but I hear all these little claims, and I go, I bet you if I go and look into that, there's probably a little bit different of a version of the story in the history if you're going to take it from like a very historical truth
well,
standpoint.
perfect example of this, dealing Marxism, the communist at work. This was like a week or so ago, where that somehow Sam Houston comes up, and he says, like, he makes a crack about, like, yeah, in Texas, all you have to do to be famous is kill all the Indians. And I just said, except that literally never happened anywhere.
Yeah,
And
well,
and he was all scoffing of me. And the things, like, at that moment, if you had asked me what do I know about Samuel Houston, I would have said Texas hero, won the war against Mexico, founded Houston 1836. That's about it. But I also know enough about the world to know that nobody anywhere ever killed all the Indians, and least of all got famous for it. So a few days later, I decided, like, well, what's up with Sam Houston? Well, when he was 15 years old, he ran away from home to live with the Cherokee for 3 years. He learned their language. He was adopted as a full member of the tribe. He married a Cherokee woman. He had Cherokee stepchildren. He was selected by them to represent the Cherokee tribes with the federal government. Somehow
Yeah,
he did all this.
the
Somehow,
truth is always more complicated, especially when you're like getting it from an activistic angle. I've seen this happen a couple times recently. There was there was I should have had this looked up, but maybe I'll pull it up in the future. But I didn't know we were going to get into it. But I saw this thing on one of the ex-Mormon sites about this lady who was a slave, and she was traded to a slave of a family of Mormons, and then brought to California, and she was part of like some sort of like trade and with Brigham Young to going to California or something like that. And it was all framed one way on the ex-Mormon site. And I looked into it, and the framing had all this added narrative to it that wasn't just the truth of the situation. And you could actually even look at the situation and see that the guy who was a Mormon converted Mormon like when he got to California. So it wasn't like the way the activists made it want to sound is that it was the person had been a Mormon all along, and then it was part of
well,
uh, Brigham Young sending them in the West. And then part of the issue of them coming is Brigham Young didn't want the person to be there as a slave. I should remember her name and pull up the exact details. But um, all I'm saying is that when I looked into the details of the story, it was not at all how the activist framed it. I saw another one on TikTok a lot about Suicide Peak over in BYU, and they say Suicide Peak's got a story where all these Mormons chased a Native American woman and their people up the peak, and then she jumped off the peak and killed herself because all the Mormons had cornered them up there. And it's just one of those stories. I'm like, well, that sounds fantastical. It sounds like a
yeah.
movie. And so I tried to look it up and look into it, and there's no sort of exact moment or story or thing that happened like
Well,
that. And
and then I mean, tying this together, I don't remember what it was like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Because I read the news every day, like BBC, whatever. I check and then stay up to date. And one day there was a report about, I can't remember if it was the Supreme Court or the Oklahoma Supreme Court, but anyway, some Supreme Court ruled that the descendants of African slaves who were owned by Cherokees must be afforded full Cherokee nationhood status. That was the day I learned the Cherokee owned African slaves.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
wow, they owned a lot of them. Who owned slaves is a big question mark in a
yeah.
society of or the history. But I said it on yesterday's podcast, but it's just the same. Like my mom's a big genealogist, and my family is I didn't even know. And I think the Mormonism kind of might have erased it, but I'm super Irish, and just I never even knew how Irish I was at the time frame. Like I had a roommate who was really Irish, who had Irish everything in her house, and we both got like DNA tests. And it turned out that I'm way, way, way more Irish than she was, and and I was like, I don't even like have 1 ounce of Irishness in me, but I have a belief. So if I did like a Lindsay Hansen Park reading of my family's history, I could write into there and say my family ran away from Irish discrimination by changing themselves American through becoming Mormon. But I don't really have proof of that. But I mean, I could write that up and make like an oppression story of that sort of thing and add it in and then make that and imagine that thought process into there and make it sound like it's part of my oppression history. Maybe it's true too. Who knows? But all I do know is that my Irishness was completely erased out. But I'm Irish as crap, and part of the Irish genealogy that my mom's found out is we didn't do no slave nothing, and we were we were we were in the mines, and we were owned by the company store. That's where we were, and
yeah.
but systemic systems of systems made us.
Like, almost everyone's great great grandpa was a serf of some kind. Almost everyone alive today. Like,
Yeah. Well, I looked into a thing about like what percentage of the U.S. actually owns slaves, And you can like get more nuanced about that because it's a bit of a misnomer too. Because just because you owned them doesn't mean you weren't somebody like the kid of a slave owner didn't own the slave, but they benefited from the slave. So
Yeah.
it was 2%, 2%, and then who they were that kind of breaks down into some different demographics you're not allowed to say.
Yeah.
But it wasn't Irish though, and
Yeah.
but the um, the from there you could say like maybe at most like if you add in everybody who might have benefited from like a type of slave that it was like 7% of the country, you know, but then you could like narrow down areas of the country and say, well, in this area of the country, it was nearly 50% of the people or something like that. And I mean, you can reevaluate it in all sorts of different ways, but I mean, it just doesn't, it just doesn't play out that we're also guilty of that. Well, but we benefited
Well,
from the whole
that's
country was,
they rely on maintaining the big, out of focus, fuzzy picture.
yeah,
The thing is, like, if you just do the big picture, America was had slaves in it for hundreds of years. Big picture. That's awful. That's like it's. There's no way around it. You, there's no yeah evil. But things like if you focus in anywhere and look anywhere, well, then everything gets really, really complicated, really, really, really fast, you know. And obviously, that's no good for them because you can't just blame an entire skin tone,
yeah, mm,
which is what they're doing. Literally, like it's that simple. Like you're white, you benefited, even though your Irish
yeah.
ancestors were, you know. And that's things like I mean, I don't know, but the whole,
I mean, they
the
came in the
whole.
1800s. The whole gangs in New York. I mean, that's my history type stuff. Like people came over in the 1800s and got oppressed by their own previous Irish people who came 20 years earlier, and that that's just there's so much of it just all throughout the whole entire history of the U.S. But then one of the critical race concepts is creating the construct of whiteness and saying that the whites created the construct of whiteness to create,
Racial constructs.
yeah. So
Nothing circular about any
but
of that.
that's a whole different digression. I'm sure we'll get into. We'll solve it. I
Yeah.
want to get into some of
Oh,
the clips, but go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. We're 20 minutes. Well, I was just because one of the things that makes me so crazy about dealing with the people who actually push this shit is being lectured to these people about diversity. Because like I am a total mutt. I'm the son of an immigrant who was the son of two immigrants from different places. That's on one side. The other side is the whole Mormon thing, and so we're talking about Scandinavians, Englishmen, Germans, Italians, Swiss, all escaping the nightmares of industrialization. Marx was talking about like they were actually there, and then like and my grandma you know we say she was German. She wasn't a German. Her birth certificate says she was born in Silesia Kingdom of Prussia. And she spoke German. And the place where she was born, which is gone now, 2 wars, they decided, like, we're not going to try to rebuild here. Every time we build here, a Russian or a German crushes us. And all that's left there is a little garden with a war memorial on it. And but anyway, her family name is Slavic. Slavic is where we get the word slave. Like so, like how the fuck am I? So like my one grandpa was English. Oh, English slaves, and then the other one was Slav slave. Like, well, how am I supposed to sort that out? You know, but the critical race theorists have sort of, oh, white. You're white. You're privileged. You benefited. Okay, if you say so.
Yeah. This is a short little clip, and you didn't see the hour I did yesterday with my buddy Kevin. I mentioned this little clip. I'm just going to show it real quick because it also kind of plays into something you and I were talking about last night. Stupid.
You have decorations in your house. I have an electrical panel.
I'll just do it this way. All right, here it comes.
It's in midterm elections, but
There we go.
I mean, Joe, look, I'm glad he's there, but he has not exactly stuck the landing. on a lot of the issues that he was dealing with. I keep saying this to the Democratic Party. The reason why you're so toxic is because you have become the party of no common sense. We are should be moving toward a colorblind society where we don't see race. Wokeism, we have to see it everywhere. All
Well, Bill Maher is a racist right-wing alt-right nut. Everybody knows that. Anybody who thinks that color blindness is anything but um, racist is obviously racist.
Color blindness. I saw on.
I,
Um,
I Ibram Kendi has been on Bill's show, I think, hasn't he? Maybe
I
Bill
doubt
was.
it. Even Kennedy doesn't really make those types of appearances, but other people have. Michael Eric Dyson.
God,
But
that guy, like Ibram Kendi, at least gives the air of a serious person. That Michael Dyson guy, he's like a clown. He's so that huckster preacher thing.
yeah.
It's like it's naked. I don't know how anybody takes him seriously. Like I can sort of understand somebody like, well, Ibram Kendi has a PhD and he speaks softly and in a serious way and uses big words. Michael Dyson is just a dickhead.
Well, I mean, I think John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry point out a whole lot that even Max Candy, even though he's comes off as a serious person or whatever, to use John McWhorter's words, that he also just does not come off as a very smart person at all.
He really doesn't.
He
His definition when they when that person in the audience asked him to define racism, and his definition,
racism is racist policies and race carried out in racist ways to it was just circular.
and like
But
I mean, I remember being 10 years old and learning about dictionaries and definitions, and them telling me that like definitions for words can't contain the word you're defining. And I learned that lesson as a 10-year-old, and I didn't need a PhD to learn it again. And like it's stunning to me first that he did that, and that everybody else in academia just let him get away with it.
yeah, well, the reason I actually pulled up that clip is because you and I were talking about last night about um, how it permeates everything. I actually think think about what the criticism would be from a woke person to what Bill Maher is saying right there. And he says the concept of they're no longer the party of common sense. But what would be the actual deconstruction of that? What is common sense? That's where they would deconstruct it. Common sense
Yeah,
is hegemony, man. It's status quo. It's Marcusian status quo. The common sense, that's the problem.
yeah, no, exactly. He's
um,
got a false consciousness.
exactly. So that the reason I brought that up is I think we were talking about last night that I'm gonna pull a couple clips from Larson and DeLynn. Although I showed Flip, I got 1,000 clips of them. The Larson wanted. I'll share screen this real quick. He wanted me to point out to him where he was being political. Although I think he was being cynical because I think they know right where they're being political. But
Well, yeah. I think that when John Larson and John DeLynn say, we are eager and anxious to hear your criticism, they mean it in the exact same way as the bishop says, is anyone opposed when they
yes, for
when they
sure.
do a calling? Like that's exactly how it at best they'll take you into a little closet room, shut the door where no one can hear you, and say, well, we're
I hear
listening.
your
You're not I
complaints. I
I
hear
hear
you.
you, and please don't come to church anymore.
Don't mention it during testimony meeting,
Yeah.
please. Don't
Yeah.
say it up at the podium. But um, let me see here, just to show this real quick.
Okay, there we
This
go.
is I commented to Larson and told him, please double check yourself, and then he said, what are you talking about? Please tell me,
Yeah.
just to put this on the screen, and
Because
this ended up
they
evolving into some.
will try to mischaracterize or just plain out lie about how this went down. They do it every time, which is I like that you've got the receipts here
Yeah.
because
Well, this whole exchange got wonky. We might get into that, but first I'm gonna show a clip from them asking for
yeah,
hands in testimony meeting or whatever,
Yeah.
asking for confirmation hands. Is anybody opposed?
Is anybody opposed?
um, but yeah, talking a little bit more about that concept of common sense. The status quo is oppressive. It's hegemonic oppressiveness. The the common sense that Bill Maher is talking about surely does have something to do with that hegemony that they're also irritated with. Wokeness is the concept of we've got to see all the problems that have been in the status quo this whole entire time. Haven't you noticed that it's all been racist, sexist, homophobic, and we've got to point it all out for you?
Yeah.
Um, sure.
Yeah. Bill Maher is fascinating because, like, you'd think that there'd be nobody swimming in a deeper pool of this bullshit, you know, and yet, like, he's still like he sounds like he talking about common sense. That's how alt-right Republican racists talk.
Well,
Literally,
people
according
have
to the
said that
left.
about him. They've made that claim about him for sure. That he's starting to sound like a Republican, or because being a liberal, it sounds like being a Republican now, an actual liberal.
Yeah.
Because now the left wing, or maybe even Democratic Party, I don't know, is illiberal. They're pushing towards progressivism, things that one of the things I said to Larson is that they have a slogan for every single liberal precept of why it's bad, and maybe one time in the future I'll make my master list of what slogan goes against every liberal precept of our common sense world.
Before you start this clip, because, like, I've often said that John Dehlin, if John Dehlin had just stayed on the church path, he would be a stake president today. And look,
Oh, I think everyone knows that.
he even has a stake president's haircut.
Yeah, I think everyone
Well,
knows. I think even he knows that, and it's kind of like one of his arguments that, like, look at all I've given up. I've given up being a king,
yeah, I guess that's true.
$100 billion.
That thing's like, I bet you if he came out tomorrow and said, "Oh my God, I felt the spirit. I'm ready to go back,"
He'd probably
they,
be a stake president in a couple of years. Yeah.
he'd slunk right in. In fact, that's probably in fact, that would work out perfectly for him. I mean, what better way to dialectic leftism into Mormonism than
I do
the
think there's a
return of John
I do
Dehlin?
think there's a dialectic going on, and there's something I'm going to point to with that, because some of the part of where these guys think they're pushing and winning on the church, I don't necessarily think it's them. I think it's kind of more when the church gives ground, it's not because John Dehlin told them to give ground, even though he'll beat his chest and say, "Whoopee, we did this." But
Yeah.
I think it's coming more from the top-down technocratic world. You know what I mean? Which, of course, is all this the same types of people, the same type of atmosphere of revolution, future revolution. We need a new industrial revolution to a technocratic future, but it's people much higher and bigger and stronger who give the same pressures money wise to the church, that accreditation departments and ESG money holdings and that sort of stuff. It's not because John Dehlin called them poopy pants. And let's listen to this.
Okay, I have one question sort of about current events. Is there anything else you wanted to, before I ask you the question?
Well, I was going to talk a little bit, on the comment.
I can't see you, so like make it pipe up if you want me to pause or something.
Okay.
Since some of the feedback we got from the last podcast, because we delve into a little bit of quote unquote politics.
Quote unquote.
This is one of the main things that I'll point out about him is like they try to talk like when they speak their politics, they're just speaking from a substrate of truth.
Yeah, no, they're above it all.
It's such a substrate of truth that it's not political.
And on that is politics is really about power. It's about who's controlling the.
No, it's not.
Politics is power.
What? No, it's not, John Larson. You are wrong. That is a bad definition of politics.
You're going off of old hegemonic common sense.
God damn it. That's right. I listened to too much Bill Maher.
that alt-right guy. All right.
The government, who controls these positions. Right now, we live in a time when certain social issues have been divided up kind of neatly and incorrectly between these two warring factions. But just because one side has claimed some issue or claimed the counter of that, I don't view that as politics. So things like vaccines and masks and abortion and voting rights and unions, none of these are political issues to me, even though political parties have sides. And
Those aren't political issues.
What the?
Even like the list that he chose is so
Yeah.
political, you know.
It.
But that's usually my main point with them is like any sort of like aside they have it's always pointing one direction of like what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
No. Like that. I mean, I commented to him exactly that. I told him exactly that. All of your opinions fall one way. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yep. But they're just substrates of truth.
Oh, that's right.
And some of these things are very instrumental to what's going on right now. I mean, with the church's latest statement on masks and vaccines, there's a lot of infighting going on inside LDS chapels right now. And to label that a political issue, I think would be naive and have you missed the bigger picture. That this is an issue that goes beyond the current political bandying, and more importantly, it's really impacting people's faith and their testimony and their attendance at church right now. And it would be a shame to not deal with issues that are alive and current in Mormonism because they've been labeled by some as political. I think the only one of
like that little point I agree with. Like the point is that you are being political when you're dealing with political issues. Like you can't like dodge out of it saying we're just.
And hasn't Lindsay Park made a little cottage career out of politicizing Mormon practice?
Well, I mean, that's what the Facebook. I mean, that's where we had the falling out with her. You know, is that she was constantly getting very political, and if we had opposing positions at all, we were trolls. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, my falling out with her started because I pointed out her blatant and naked hypocrisy, and so they don't like that.
Well, I mean, that's going to be one of our substrates of things
Yeah.
going on here. But let's go.
other thing I want to say, we do get comments that say, you guys are leftists or whatever, you need to represent the right. I have
No.
Oh,
Nobody
you
said
missed it. You missed the best part.
I'm sorry.
I
Oh,
have
that's
no
right.
idea what that means.
Like, I don't believe that anybody says you need to represent the right. I don't believe that that's what they're saying. That I don't believe anybody's saying that. I think they're saying, could you knock it off with the axe grinding politics?
Yeah,
Not
yeah. Like there is a way. There is a way to even cover these things and just kind of like when you give a little bit of an aside, you could mention both sides a little bit and
like,
you can get out of it, you know. But
I watched this Turkish ex-Muslim guy has a YouTube channel, and he puts up videos all the time talking about Islam. Never gets political. Weirdest thing.
yeah.
He just doesn't go there, and it works
Like I
out.
said, it might have been a less charged time, but I don't think he got political back in the Mormon Expression days. I'd have to go
No,
listen to it.
I don't think
I
said,
never knew he was a socialist back then, you know.
I don't know
Now
that
it
he
comes
was.
out every episode.
That's the thing. If he was back then, that sort of doesn't fit because socialists that keep it under their hats are not real. Like,
Well, I mean, because I think even his politics have gone more and more.
like
Well,
I think I think if anything, it's in the years since Mormon Expression ended, he has slid into the socialism thing.
But
I always
that's
got the
actually kind
impression-
of one of my issues with ex-Mormonism is I think that on average is what happens. I think that you turn towards statism coming out of a
Yeah.
religion, and fine, but my bigger irritation with most people like this is how much they obfuscate and hide instead of just, you know.
I'm not a socialist. I just believe that people should own. Wait, the workers should own the means of production. Oh, okay. It's
Yeah.
like
I mean, that's
I'm
what
not.
he said.
I'm
Well,
not a
he said
Mormon.
socialist, but not I'm a socialist. He didn't say communist, but I have that clip somewhere.
It's
But
just
not
kind of
pulled
like
up today.
saying it's like saying I'm not a Mormon. I just have faith that I'm a child of God and that Joseph Smith is a
Was a
prophet
prophet, and the Book
and
of
the Book
Mormon
of
is
Mormon is
true.
true. I'm not a Mormon.
Yep. I think it would be ridiculous to call such things religious. Okay.
All right.
But I want that money clip again, so I rewinded it a little bit because I like the.
Yeah. Sorry.
as political. I think the only one other thing I want to say, we do get comments that say, you guys are leftists or whatever, you need to represent the right. I have no idea what that means.
Come on.
No, John, you know exactly what it means. I
Yes,
know
you
because
do.
I remember back in the old days of your podcast, you did comment on politics by being basically neutral. Like, that was your game back then, and I respected you for it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I loved about John Larson was that. Meanwhile, with Delin and Lindsay Park and all that crap being nothing but axe grinding, I thought that Mormon Expression was a sincere and honest and straightforward exploration of Mormonism as you could ever have. It was the best. It was the best Mormon ex-Mormon content out there.
I thought
Compared.
so too, but I mean, he makes me want to reevaluate it, but I don't want to go back and listen to all of it. But I was there, front row seat. If it was live, we went to. If it was live, you and I were trying to get there, and
Yeah. No, and
I
then the other, when you were talking about your past experience with Lindsay Park, I didn't grow up in her ward or anything like that. But like I did a bunch of shit for her at Sunstone. That was my way of contributing.
yeah, you
You
did some
know, like
panels. You were with.
I hosted stuff. I did panels. I volunteered to do Sunstone shit for her. Like, and
I did some Sunstone stuff for her too, but
yeah,
but
like, and so it's like it's just clear that like it's not like we've only ever been antagonistic. Like we both started out basically on Lindsay's side,
what
and I
and
like we
beyond
started.
that too is like this is how many years later? We're 12 something years later, and I've never really put my thoughts out there. Just on some like Facebook stuff, I've
Yeah,
commented back and I said, "Well, I think that's a little bit of a stretch," or "I think you're inaccurate there." And then as time, I'll be honest, like yeah, we got a little bit more direct and salty the more they would brush us off, or the more they'd say,
well, yeah.
you know.
Well,
But
I mean, that's things like they put you down that path where, like, if you try being direct, they'll ignore you. If you try being snarky, they say, "Ah, you're being snarky." If you use satire, they get angry. Like, because that's one thing that happens to me all the time. It's like people tell me that all the time. Like, well, maybe it's not what you say; it's how you say. It's like, no, no,
I
it,
I
it
have a
doesn't matter. It
I
doesn't
have a
matter how
clip
you
for
say
that. Trust me, I got a clip for that.
it. All
So,
right.
So of those people out there, I know John, I feel safe because I've seen you issue this statement many times to people. If there is an alternative right wing or conservative perspective that we're missing out on, please explain it to us. Don't just tell
Okay.
us. Because in all the feedback I've had over the years, people say, "Oh, you got that wrong," and it's always like, "Well, how? Help me understand." So
And
come
then
on.
you said, "Stay away from my family, John."
I'm
come on the
one way or the other.
podcast.
I'm not a Democrat. You can check my voting record. I've never registered as a Democrat. I hate the Democrats. I hate the Republicans.
That means he's not political.
Oh, he's not political. But
But
also, John, somebody did tell you. Somebody told you carefully, and you said, "Stay away from my family." You fucking
no,
hack.
that was me. But he was making the claim that I wasn't being careful, that I was being kind of esoteric, and I agree. I sort of was because we were just going back and forth on YouTube comments. But in the past, back when he was on Facebook, I did make careful claims to him.
Oh yeah.
And there was a time frame when Lindsay was even asking me for ideas on how they were going to do a podcast where they were going to do a nuanced um, review of criticisms, and they asked me to feed them ideas for it, and I started feeding them some ideas for it. And I was giving them to Lindsay. I don't know if she passed them on to John. I don't know if that was ever going to go or not, or if it was, Lindsay stepping up with an idea that never panned out. But I gave them a large list of different things of like where they could jump off and talk about things where I disagreed with them. And one of the things that's funny about it too is like they're even saying like right wing or conservative or that sort of stuff. This I
You and
will.
I are you and I are both lefties, basically.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I kind of own now that it's a conservative position. My liberalism is a conservative position
Yeah,
now because I'm conserving it. I'm trying to conserve liberalism,
yeah, yeah. Like I
and
mean, I realized this a while ago, and it's true, but it's hilarious. But because like all these people keep calling me alt right and conservative and all this shit. I am left of Bill Clinton in 1996.
yeah, yeah. Well, but even Trump was too,
Yeah.
So
All right.
My positions tend to be fairly leftist by current standards, but that's just where I'm at.
I think that's where I had to stop. So he admits it right there, where he does in somewhat other areas. But I have some other clips and a bunch of other times where he says, in this instant, I'm not being political. I'm not talking politics. I'm not doing politics. And it's almost like kind of like a one for one. As soon as he starts saying that, it's when he is talking politics.
Yeah,
And
it's pretty hand wavy.
yep. So let's just go right into this this other one here.
And the manipulated mind, subtitled "Brainwashing, Conditioning, and Indoctrination." He focuses mostly on what happens to prisoners of war. But it was a really important book that I read when I was deconstructing Mormonism for myself.
I started this one a little earlier, but I wanted to get that deconstructing word in there because the actual clip's like 30 seconds later. But deconstruct, 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 deconstruct. I mean, I think when people come out even saying that term or the way they popularize that term, to me, there's something political in that itself. But it's the new religion. Got to deconstruct your deconstruction.
Yeah.
But I mean, I get a little pedantic about that because I hate them using the word deconstruction. Deconstruction is a postmodern term from Derrida, had to do with like structuralism and words and the way you deconstruct words. And later it was a little bit adjusted. Some people say from a misunderstanding about what deconstruction was by Judith Butler, but Judith Butler started using it in the sense of deconstructing categories. Like if you deconstruct Mormonism, it would be kind of more like blending Mormonism into Calvinism or something like that. You know, it'd be,
But yeah,
it'd be like busting down of walls more than
it's definitely one of those sneaky Marxist dual meaning words things where
yeah.
they know that they have their special esoteric true meaning of deconstruction, but they're happy to let everybody else like me run around using the word in the way you like in the
Well,
colloquial understanding.
words
And
evolve so much. I mean, now they use it so much that it might as well mean what it means. But I mean, it's kind of more like something like falsification or which they have a falsification problem. I'll get into that in the future, but it's more reverse engineering. I don't know, but I guess it just means that now. Deconstruct. The Kara person, nuance ho on this, she uses it as if it were some sort of a religious activity. It's
yeah,
almost like going. I've got to go deconstruct my. I'm gonna. It's almost like I'm gonna go
it's
do baptisms for the dead.
no,
So I'm gonna go deconstruct baptisms for the dead
no.
for today's
There,
religious activity.
there's a better term for it, I think. It's ponder and pray.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what deconstruction is. Ponder and pray.
yeah. But you got to go in the direction. You got to go in the direction
Yeah.
of
Well, no, because that's exactly you're supposed to ponder and pray, and as long as you're ending up more Mormon afterward, you did it right.
yeah.
If you ponder and pray and go, hang on a second,
But if
that's
you when you deconstruct, if you return back to Bill Maher's status quo, you've deconstructed wrong.
yeah.
But
Like I mean, like I want the one thing that I would like to like all of the the gender queer theory stuff that these guys have obviously bought into is like, okay, the statement "I was born in the wrong body" is a metaphysical claim. End of statement. It's true. I know it is. Everybody knows it is. But I obviously it'll never happen. But I wish that I could have John Larson and John Dehlin in the room and say, explain to me using logical positivism that you demand from the Mormons how someone can be born into the wrong body.
oh, you're poking at the axioms, Flip.
Oh,
Stop it.
Urgh.
Yeah, I mean it's that exact sort of a issue because you also know from Judith Butler's queering, if you got into
When I was a kid, queering was a form of abuse that we would. It's playground bullying.
but the queering will be like we've always got to deconstruct any sort of understanding we think we've come to on anything. So even if you could find a scientific logical positivism proof of all that stuff. Like, we've found the thing that says if we find this in somebody's brain, it means they were born in the wrong body. Well, then there would be a falsification opportunity there. So anybody who wanted to randomly claim it, you could then go do a falsification test through some sort of science. And Judith Butler do not want that. It's
No.
no. If somebody claims it, we're gonna entertain it, and so if people go and try to make scientific claims or try to search for the science of it, the same theorists are going to not want or reject any sort of finding that leads towards some sort of way of proving or falsifying anything.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, because in that sense of like people, like if you want to know what people's motivations are, look at what the result is, because you try to think about like what makes somebody go down this weird endeavor, and like the outcome is, it seems to me that the outcome is to show that being sexually normal is not normal.
Yeah.
The only normal is not normal, and normal isn't normal.
Well, now John DeLynn proudly announces that his daughter is a LGBTQ because she is asexual. And you have the other thing where was it Bill de Blasio's daughter or it might have been Cuomo's, who says she's demisexual, which is the concept of you have to be emotionally attracted to a person to be sexually attracted to a person.
Yeah, wow, that
And
really
now
needed
you're part
special
of
work.
the queer community because you have a pretty normal sexuality. Oops, I said the word normal. Oops, back to common sense. Oops, back to, oh gosh, none of that's good.
Oh. It's so weird because, like, I mean, the way things have flipped. Because, like, when I was young and I was raised in Utah, and it was the 80s and 90s, and like when we were kids, like gay, and it was still like a little bit weird, like, oh, what, that guy's gay, blah blah blah. And then, like, but by the mid 90s, it had been told to me enough times, and I had deconstructed it and pondered and prayed enough times, when people said, like, look, sexuality, it's just how people are. It doesn't really affect you. Maybe it's hard to understand, but just learn to deal with it. Like, you can live with it. And then I was like, oh, I see. Like, some men are sexually attracted to other men. What difference does it make to me? None. Okay. All right. And then, but like, how did we get from, oh, people's sexuality is a personal matter and we shouldn't make it political, to where we are now, where straight is an insult.
Yeah.
Straight is a
Straight
calling someone straight
invalidates
now.
your access to truth.
Straight, yeah, calling someone straight now, it's almost a moral smear. They're almost saying, like, oh, you don't even understand oppression, straight. Like,
It's a false consciousness.
yeah,
I
because,
don't
like,
know if that one's false, but
yeah, I guess, because, like, to this day you can still go on to, like, conservative Christian talk radio and listen to them talk for an hour about how, according to science, the only reason anybody's gay is because they had a bad relationship with their dad. Like, and it's like, okay, that's absurd. That's absurd. But then, like, these guys turn around and, like, I need to announce that I am a sexual category of someone who likes to have sex with people that I'm romantically interested in, as if that's some kind of breakthrough.
especially for like young women. I'm pretty sure that's just normal female.
Yeah, like,
mean?
that's the thing, is, like, like, call me crazy, but from what I've learned, being alive and reading literature, is that in general, men are more likely to be into emotionally unconnected sex,
Yeah.
and women are more interested in emotionally connected sex.
Well, you ask
None
me
of that
too,
is
like,
remotely controversial to me, and like, but then, because built into the lefty deconstructionist whatever view is moralizing this stuff, of actually trying to balance out and saying, oh, power, privilege, all this crap, and like, I don't see any of it. I just don't see it.
you know. Well, beyond that too, I mean, I'd go so far as to say somebody who's asexual, especially like a young woman, that's probably a pretty normal trajectory too. Like
Yeah, I
it
mean,
doesn't awaken until sometimes in their mid 20s,
I
you know.
I learned from Lindsay Park that it's very common that many women can't even experience orgasms until they're in their 20s.
Yeah.
Lindsay taught me that, but I guess she believes in normal biology.
Well, but now it's an identity. At least it's an identity, unless that identity changes. But right now it's an identity, and it makes you part of the queer community, and it makes you
They,
somebody on the opposite side of the hegemony, somebody who can be considered one of the oppressed, um, or marginalized around all of us, marginalizers.
yeah, totally. And like, let's look at the people we're talking about. Like, is Lindsay Park oppressed? Who's oppressing her right now? Aside from you and I.
I think she felt oppressed by her Mormon upbringing and going through
Okay,
the traditional thing that it was like an oppressive what do they call it, gender role type dealio.
I guess so, but like, it didn't seem to like. It obviously didn't take. So what's the problem? Like, I mean, like we were all Mormon too.
Yeah,
And according to her, patriarchy hurts everyone, and Mormonism is extra super double patriarchal on top of all the baseline patriarchy. Like our
I think it's pretty pathetic that Mormonism, all you ever hear from are the ideas of rich white men. Now let's listen to these two rich white men
exactly.
explain things to us.
Yeah, to be pontificated to by some inexpert person, uncredentialed inexpert person talking way out of their field. Okay.
Deconstruction doesn't it only comes right to my face and stops right before it gets to me. I can't be deconstructed.
Yeah.
That's what most like I say like that most of those different modern academic, the reason they get postmodern in their assessments is because I've made the joke that it's like making special pleading sound academic, but in most of the cases it's why the social construct is true for you and not for me. And
Yeah.
I would guess maybe in these two guys' mind, although they're probably the type who would self-flagellate a bit and say, yeah, we should be deconstructed, we should be decentered, even though they wouldn't
Well, I
decenter
mean, they
themselves.
did. They both said if we're wrong, we want to know exactly how. And
Well,
then,
that's just being falsified. But I'm saying like in the world of deconstructionists, they're not supposed to be centering themselves at all in the discussion.
oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's one of the. Did you see Kate Kelly on the Midnight Mormons? Did you listen to that one?
No, I
So
should do that. I just have
she
a
made the
hard
whole
time
point. It's
listening.
the reason Kate Kelly's had a falling out with them because she gets fully Foucauldian on these guys saying that they're profiting off of the revolutionary movement. They're profiting off of. They're still just straight white males centering themselves as the heroes
Oh, yeah.
in the
No,
debate, and they're profiting off of it in their. But why I might say I remember John Larson complaining about the concept of allyship years ago, but it might have just been because he wanted to be an ally and he recognized that the deconstruction would decenter him out of the
yeah. Because
out of
part
the
of being an
conversation.
ally, like, yeah, they say they want an ally in the fight. Step one,
Yeah.
disappear.
Yep. Shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Wait, that's what I was doing the whole time. Actually, I wrote a guest article for Feminist Mormon Housewives, like somewhere like 2000. I looked up the movie. It was like
You,
2011 or 13, and I said in the guest article, I was talking about the movie The Help, and all the way back then, I was pointing to them that movie centers white women in the center of the uh, the racial battle of the civil rights. But I'm just here listening. That's what I say in the thing. I know that you guys are your guys' voice. This is a place for your voice, and just I'm here listening. That's what my thing said, because I knew that the only place I could be is in a place of sitting and listening. But I was aware of the deconstruction before the very first time you ever heard the song "Is There a Better Place?" to get your point across. Before the very first one of those was ever played, John Larson, I already knew about deconstruction, and I already knew that allyship was a dead end. I sat in the basement with Sam Wellers for some queer readings, and I found out that my role there was to be the person who was supposed to listen to the pain and nothing else.
Yeah. That whole thing that like that white savior, because part of that recentering thing, that is one of the more evil concepts. Like to actually like literally there you cannot be good. You literally can't be good. Like
No, it's like it's original sin.
yeah, like Abraham Lincoln was wrong to make himself the guy to emancipate the slaves. What an ass.
But beyond that, like D'Angelo and Kendi's books, I mean, they explicitly say that like you've got to do like this constant form of constant repentance and constant dismantling and constant decentering yourself, constant for forever.
Well, I guess that kind of like it's what allows you to continue to sin, as it were. Like I think about my communist friend at work who derives most of his income as a landlord.
Yeah.
You can't make
There's
this shit
cognitive
up.
dissonances, and this clip is good because it kind of gets into some of that sort of stuff. But there's a cognitive dissonance in being the two white, straight, married men who
With
fit
Kate,
in the status quo,
yeah,
being the spokesperson, and
they're
Kate
both
Kelly has that.
they're 6-figure type guys.
Yeah, listen to Kate Kelly talk about it she complains about it on the Midnight Mormons podcast, says that she thinks they are doing what Derek Bell might call interest convergence. Liberal white males just profit off of the only reason that they're in the fight is for the profit.
Yeah. Although I do have the question of how does Kate Kelly derive her living now?
You can't deconstruct her. I mean, that's where the special pleading comes in, man. There's going to be some sort of a paper I can pull up that says no, the deconstruction stops with me. Like that's what I would call the concept of Kimberly Crenshaw's whole entire intersectionality, her whole entire realization. I think it stems back to some other thinkers, but the whole entire concept was no, stop with your deconstruction. It stops here. It can deconstruct you. You're still deconstructed, but it stops with me because of my structural determinism.
Yeah. Did Kate Kelly ever cop to there was no rape in pre-Columbian America?
I don't think so, man.
Because
That was just like some
she
Twitter
deleted the
post.
tweet. She
She
deleted
did?
the tweet. I didn't she. I thought she my understanding, because I've never had Twitter.
That one pops back up on Twitter so much as like
it
people who
has
don't
to.
even know Kate Kelly or Mormon or Mormonism or anything. It pops up as like the grand poobah of dumb fakes.
No, and it deserves to be. It deserves to
Noble
be.
savages. Yeah.
I just can't believe that. But that's the thing, though, is that like nobody in the left. Did anybody on the left point out to Kate Kelly that what a stupid thing to say? But no, because it fits. It fits perfectly into the whole.
Well, that's the exact type of history telling where you can like make claims like that I'm sure can't bear out closer detail. Some of them they probably make some sort of claim like that, like happens in the 69 project. It's like that would be impossible to test one way or the other. But you're making these wild claims about what people thought or did about it. I remember when I was listening to some of the before I even kind of understood this, I was listening to some of the Year in Polygamy episodes. It's about talking about stuff in the past, and Lindsay had supposedly dug up this person or the other talking about their plight in 18 something central southern Utah, and the way the lady was talking, and she was like supposedly the diaries of some Mormon in some central, I don't know, Price, Utah person, and the way the lady was talking, I was like, holy crap, they were that feminist. Like I was like, I remember sitting there listening and thinking to myself, like saying, they were talking about this sort of feminist stuff in Price, Utah in 1905. And I remember having those cognitive dissonance moments myself when I was sitting there listening to them. Like, And I'd have to like go to do like a detailed look into all of it. The same way people, I wish there was more people, because like people have done detailed dives into how 1619 Project cuts all these corners and fudges history. And
Yeah, well, it's like, because that's the thing is like these people take the idea seriously. It's like, what if we take our modern ideas and just put them in the mouths of the past? And and
And
again,
that's
they
what
do
I
this out of
argue John Larson's doing now in some of his more recent episodes with Lynn. He talked
yeah,
about some of these old Willie Hancock companies, like the church was the leaders were the bourgeoisie, and the people pushing the carts were the proletariat,
totally.
and doing it under false consciousness types of Marxist reading. But
A couple of points that they come away with, which is, you've seen lots of movies where people resist to torture. You can't. No one can. It can't be done. They will change your psychology if it's the CIA or whatever. They will win. They will beat you. And he does talk about how they not only can get you to spill whatever secrets you have, they'll get you to love them, like real.
1984, man.
But real quick, John, I'm curious, I'm genuinely, because here he says saying like, no, torture works, torture works, torture works, torture works, torture works. I thought waterboarding didn't work.
Yeah, I don't think this is true. I remember there was like a part in one of those narco shows that there was a guy who had been a torturer who was able to withstand some torturing techniques because he knew how to.
Yeah, no, like I mean, I think that whatever that statement, I don't know, like it's kind of a
Yeah,
weird thing.
I'm telling you, there's a million and one little things like that like maybe not, and across 5-6 episodes that are 3 hours each, I hear all these little things like that. That you got to go. I don't know about that, and
Exactly.
it would take my whole life to. So more of the point here is just pointing where they get political, because maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I sometimes, because I'll even say, like, if you're gonna do an honest test of anything, if they're right, they're right, but we should double check that. You know what I mean? There's so many things.
Yeah, but for now, it fits his narrative, so there's no sense in
Yeah, just pipe it
questioning that.
out.
Yeah,
Like you'll have real feelings of affection for your torturers when they come into the
Like
chamber.
Elizabeth Smart eventually did for Brian David Mitchell.
Right.
In
Yeah.
some way.
Elizabeth Smart is a great example of that. And it happens over and over and over again. And how we can.
Patty Hearst with, her telling.
Yes.
Tara Burrell at Mormon Stories. What?
Truth to that.
here
There's truth to that.
I'm gonna get this podcast canceled in the first episode. I would say that a good example of people being tortured, learning to love their torturers, would be young kids getting put onto the transgender medical intervention train.
Ding 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 ding. But let's come back to that. But I mean, I think that's a fair. Sometimes part of this whole entire thing is I'm saying justify your positions, justify your statements. But I think that thing's axiomatic. That's just
Yeah.
you're right. So, but let's keep going.
It's the unfortunately
There is some truth to what she just said, though. She's I don't think like they're like torturing her or any sort of thing like that, but I actually think that she's far more liberal than some of these ideas are, and she doesn't quite understand the the
Yeah.
claims being made and that stuff. Maybe she does, maybe she's all the way progressive or something like that. But when she talks about being critical, there's a double meaning of critical in modern progressivism.
Yeah, that's one of those things where they with people deliberately, where they let people use the colloquial
There's a
meaning of
Mott and
critical.
Bailey term, and I think
Yeah.
she brings up the word critical all the time, and I think she's talking colloquial critical.
Yeah.
I don't think she means the Horkheimer Adorno critical.
No, I think you're right.
the roadmap for how to manipulate the psychology of human beings has been discovered and into the playbook that the church uses. And unfortunately, it is so effective that you'll have grown, educated adults who have been taught, who've been conditioned to have certain emotional responses to certain things, and they full on believe that. That's what, when you talk about Terrell Gibbons and Fiona, I really, really enjoy Terrell's book By His Own Hand. I would recommend that. And we're gonna do a podcast here of what I recommend, the faithful books that I recommend to read. And that's one of them. I would stay clear of the rest of his stuff, but that one's good.
The rest of his.
Well, it's just because it doesn't. He's a beautiful man. He's an admirable person. It's just what he's peddling now has nothing to do with Mormonism, right? But you have these people who are very, very intelligent and understand the way the world works, but cannot see the operant conditioning that has been installed in their own self, which is why ridicule.
Here it comes.
And the
Ridicule.
stuff that I engage in is not by accident, because what I'm doing, dear reader, is I'm breaking your operant conditioning.
So ridicule's okay to break operant conditioning.
Unless I do it to Lindsay Hansen Park.
Or if I even, because I mean, have I even been ridiculing of him? Maybe today I have been, but everything up to this point, it's been more just, hey, listen. It hasn't been any sort of listen, you big dumb goobus or something like that, you know?
Yeah. No, you didn't. No, I mean, the whole thing is there. It's still there. They haven't. I mean,
No, they did delete my last.
Oh, that's right. They did. Yeah, your last thing did get hidden. But I mean, it's funny. They didn't hide the part where you replied totally reasonably. John Larson played dumb. You responded totally reasonably, and John Larson said, "Stay away from my family."
Yeah, and then
like, it's all there. It's all still there. I mean,
they just removed something down the line where I doubled down and said, "Yes, I have receipts of what I'm talking about is true."
Yeah.
And
no, I mean, look, he lied because, like, you mentioned, like, yeah, I know you. I spent a Christmas Eve with you, and John Larson said that's not true. He called you a liar, not directly, but he said, "I've never spent Christmas Eve with any but my friends and family." To which I piped up, "I was there, John.
yeah,
I was there. It was Christmas Eve."
I got receipts from the other girl who went there with us, and
Yeah, like,
I picked her up from her family's Christmas Eve party to take her there.
Like, we've got the, like, I don't think I tried to look on my Facebook Messenger, and I think whatever account John Larson was using back then has been changed because it's gone now. Otherwise, I found that. But you've got, like, from your girlfriend talking about it at the time, like, yeah, like, no, John, we were there, like, and what a lame thing. And that's like, and it would be one thing if he said, like, well, okay, fine, it was Christmas Eve, but, like, I mean, well, I guess he can't walk that back.
Well, there was like a part of it where I was like, why is he denying that? Because, like, it makes it sound like we were close or something like that. I wasn't meaning to make it sound like it was close. That's literally the only extended time I've ever spent with him.
I think
I was letting him know who the guy was he was talking to from that one time of extended time I spent with him.
Yeah. No, and he knows what he's doing. He's trying to smear you. It's like the implication that you and I are just weird axe-grinding goofs that
are somehow harassing
and making shit up. Like,
and
no,
chasing him
John.
down. But at the same time, too, he's smarter than this, even all that sorts of stuff. He knows the same way so in that same interaction, I started trying to push on him on some of these things because he said, get concrete. So I started getting concrete. And then he said,
stay away from my family.
No. First he said, let's meet in a bar to talk about this.
Oh, that's right. He's like, yeah. Oh, like, it would be much better to meet in person. Like, okay, first off, you don't mean that, because also, like, he said this right after he says, by the way, I live in Oregon now. Like, oh yeah, let's meet up, John.
But beyond that too is, like, we showed already in the other clip, they're saying, come on in, come to the podcast, come tell us, and all that sorts of stuff. But I also know, and one of the things I called out is the reason you want to meet in private is because I bet you even some of the stuff, even like we used to think, maybe you're not like a full true believer on every little detail of it, but you can't say that out loud.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe you are a full true believer one way or the other. But then even if you are a full true believer, you know that the orthodoxies of this world means you can't platform me. You can't platform the criticisms. You can't have them on your show, because it's even considering them is like considering it's like bringing a flat earther to a cosmology or whatever class, the university.
It's like having a Baptist teach seminary.
Yeah. So but that was our exchange back and forth on that. But I mean, it just goes to show that no, they don't want to entertain.
Yeah, no, if there's a theme to this podcast, the point of this podcast, when John and John say that they are open to criticism, no, they are not.
No.
They are not, and they are explicitly not,
Yeah.
and they are unconscionably not open to criticism.
Yeah. So the only realm I'm questioning is like, how meta is it? Like, how much are they being just obtuse, or how much are they playing the double mouth game? You know.
Well, I wonder because, like, I mean, we were Mormons. We were both Mormons. We were both missionaries, and like, obviously, we believe that shit to some. We believe that shit enough to go around talking about it all the time, like it was true. You know, and like, and I mean, that's the thing is like, I don't look back and ever think like I lied to anybody, but also I was one of those people. Like I never used the I know construction in testimonies. I
Yeah,
never said
neither.
I know. Like
Except in Spanish, I did. I always felt it easier to say stuff I didn't fully believe in Spanish. That's what helped about the.
I wonder.
Mm,
Yeah, but like, cause like, did I ever like, did anybody ever call me on something and I just denied it? Like, I don't think so. I really don't think that anybody ever said, like, there's definitely stuff where I'm like, well, I don't know if that's true, like that I genuinely didn't know, but like, because like for example, I had several times the experience with several companions because where I was raised by old time Mormon historians from southern Utah, like all of the weird creepy shit in Mormon history about polygamy and mountain meadows and all this shit, like it's not Mormon history for me, it's family history. Like I grew up with these stories not as Mormon stories but as family stories. So like my dad told me all about the penalties and John D. Lee and all this shit before I was 12. So when we would be in mission land tracting and knocking on doors, and where I was in California, like everybody knew all of the dirt on Mormonism, and they would, and people in the house would be like, "Well, no, I don't believe you guys for all these reasons," and we'd be walking away, and my companion would say like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you said all those anti-Mormon lies," and I'd have to say like, "No, Joseph Smith did marry a 14-year-old, like whatever it was, like that story about how he would go ask a man to marry his daughter or brother and all, or sister, sorry, all this shit, like that's my great uncle's diary that is cited as evidence for all that shit, and so like, but like in that case where like if that kid, if he says like, no, that's not true, he's not lying. But like with John Larson, when it comes to this stuff, like I don't know, like we can't say that, oh, he was raised in it and so therefore we can give him a pass for not knowing what's up. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this.
well, he regurgitates so many of the different like precepts, and that's what I have a lot of them. I have I was showing Flip earlier. I've pulled up 100 clips, not doing them today, but of all these little things where he kind of regurgitates the precepts of different um, theories, academic theories, and so I
Yeah,
am pretty sure he has some sort of
he's getting it from somewhere.
yeah.
It has to be coming from somewhere. He's not spontaneously coming
He's
up.
not doing the thing where they say like there's two comedians who make the same joke at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's not suddenly landing on all this modern day critical theory just from his own intelligence. Yeah.
in the last 5 years, John Larson reinvented historical materialism.
Well, it's beyond that too, because like I would like him to just be like a vulgar Marxist. You know, what I mean, if you're just like a vulgar Marxist who just looks at the economics of the oppressor oppressed situation, but no, he delves into the cultural stuff. He delves into the modern day critical race theory. He delves into the
Gender theory, the queer
gender theory.
theory.
He delves into all of it, and he has all of the lined up arguments. He's never gonna. This is just like the argument of like the stuff's not in schools. Like he's not gonna say the world. I'm gonna do some critical race theory for you now, but he'll also talk about the double meaning of the. This is the concrete thing I started pushing on him on was his double description of what white supremacy is,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
or talking about. I mean, I have a clip of him saying that, basically announcing that like he got woke. You know, like I started seeing it everywhere, and then you notice it's in everything, and then it's the substrate of all. You know what the basic definition of like if you look at James Lindsay's short version of critical race theory, it's John Larson basically announced he had that moment in one of the podcasts. You know, and he's like, I found out it's the substrate of all interactions, and it's not did racism happen? It's how did it manifest itself? It's but they're for sure not his own invented ideas that he's suddenly bringing into all this stuff. And actually, when I was in grad school, half of what grad school was, and I had no idea I was getting into this when I was a young little wee whippersnapper, that the whole idea is to read things through a lens. And so he's been through some sort of schooling. I don't know if it's schooling, but lately, to learn how to read things through a lens, like the way you get taught to do it in liberal
Yeah,
arts schools nowadays.
totally.
I was just
Like,
thinking, look, this shows my this shows stuff that's on my queue over here, and like, oh
yeah,
my gosh,
look at
I'm
you.
John Larson. I'm apolitical, not political, apolitical. Don't look over here. Don't um, but anyway,
He's got more.
all those, yeah. This is kind of a longer clip because I mean I think it gets even juicier. This is actually the last clip I have because all those other clips I won't go over right now today. But most of those other clips are kind of pointing out little areas where he's doing little tidbits, like little
Well,
sides of critical theory lens.
I don't know
And
exactly why, but something popped up into mind thinking about these guys, which is kind of like, and it's, I mean, it's them and it's everybody in the woke left movement now. But it's like, because I've had this thought before, because like for example, these guys talk a lot about gay conversion therapy,
yeah,
and that like it's not okay to try to change someone's nature, and I agree with that. Like it's not okay to try to change someone's nature. So I'm asking you, John Larson and John Dehlin and everyone else that's woke, stop trying to make me a racist. You can't make me racist. It's not in my nature. My
you're trying to
nature.
make me see race in all things, everything.
Stop it. Yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay to try to make me into a racist. I'm never gonna be a racist. You
Don't you
can't
know
make
you're
me.
already doing it? You're already doing it.
Oh,
Can't you
that's right.
see? Can't you see? The yeah, we talked a bit about like the conversion therapy stuff yesterday too, a little bit.
Yeah.
But
That's thing is like I feel like I'm in like a gigantic attempted conversion therapy that's trying to make me into a racist. And I'm like, and like, because I've had this conversation with like some of my white ex-Mormon friends that love Mormon stories and Mormon expression, all this stuff. And like I've had a couple of these conversations where I ask people, like, did you really feel racist growing up in 1995, um, Provo? And I had a couple of friends who said, like, yeah, like my mom was like super shitty about Mexicans, and I'm like yeah, okay, I mean maybe, but like I can genuinely say like in my house,
well, part
racism
of
was only ever just not even, it wasn't just a matter that it was morally wrong, it was intellectually, biologically, socially, it's incorrect. It's a shitty way to look at anything. And that's the only attitude I've ever had about race.
it's what I had too, and it's what I'm pretty fairly sure most of the kids around me growing up in the schools in Salt Lake
Yeah.
Valley, the
Like
center of Mormonism in the
I've
same
had
area,
enough people that in
where all
serious
of us
conversation.
idolized Karl Malone,
Yeah, yeah.
idolized, you know,
Yeah. I no yeah.
Jimi Hendrix. Like name the type of thing we idolized. There was a black person we idolized,
Will
like
Smith, like yeah, who was the most popular people in
Will
1996?
Smith. You
Yeah.
had Michael Jordan. Then in the comedy side, everybody wanted to be Eddie Murphy. Uh,
And then
Michael Jackson, if you could call him black.
like
And
everybody loved Ice-T.
In Living Color was the Cat's Meow.
Yeah. No, but
Um,
like and yeah, but somehow like the Johns want to convince me that I was raised in like
well,
1940s Kentucky.
I had very different experience too, in the sense that in my high school, the three black kids that are there, we were definitely white dominant. The three black kids at my high school were three of the most popular kids, like by far. Like maybe it was just their luck because they were all like attractive, athletic kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they were top tier popular and above me in the social status. You know what I mean? Like, and I had a
So
big crush on the one female. And I remember one time she walked with her. She was one of the first girls ever to put her arm around me in the hall, and made my year. And she did it once, just walking down the hall. She put her arm around me.
It wasn't like that episode of MASH where you were scared that you were turned black if somebody's
Oh my
black.
gosh, I caught the. Yeah.
I got black. Like, well, see, this is the other thing that's fascinating though. Is like what the same friend that I mentioned said, like, well, her mom was shitty about Mexicans. Like, I kind of said, like, well, maybe it's just a socioeconomic thing because I've met your mom. Um,
Yeah.
but also, like, here's the other irony: is that this same girl has an aunt who a white Mormon aunt who married an African, a very African, not an African American, a proper African, and thus all of her kids were African American kids. And you know, even before the conversation where I asked her if she was ever ever experienced racism, you know, I asked her, like, you know, what was it like for your black cousins growing up in Provo? And she said she related to me that they related to her, that like people loved us. Frankly, felt like we could do no wrong. Like, you know, like it was. In fact, it was a little bit like, if anything, it was to give Lindsay's a nod. Is like, and the Kate Kellys. They maybe even pedestalize them, not tokenize them, but even like they even felt that they probably got extra good attention because of the color, let alone any kind of racial oppression or any of that.
To get full critical theory, I think it's
Yeah.
Allison Bailey. It might be Barbara Applebaum who said they eroticized them.
Oh
But
yeah. Like, I've got cousins that are Samoan and Hawaiian. They're brown. And like my cousins, you know, they never reported anything racist from school. I do remember my cousins saying to me, like, remember them asking me, like, when you go into the 7-Eleven, when you go into the supermarket, do they follow you around? I'm like, no. And I thought it was kind of strange. And then there was a couple of times that I actually noticed it when I would go around with my cousins. But they were also kind of, you know, teenage punks. And frankly, like, you know, a lot of teenage punks get followed around, you know, like, because that's the thing. I don't know. I'm kind of going off on a whole tangent here, but like, because on the one hand, like, well, my cousins were brown and they complained about if they went into a store, they got followed around by security. But I also had a bunch of white friends that were like metalheads, and they constantly complained about the exact same stuff. And I was always just like, I've got no problem with cops. Nobody
I
follows me around.
ask my mom, because I got pulled over a lot in high school, and it's probably because I was a crappy driver or whatever. But even ask my mom, they think it was because I was a long hair at the time,
Yeah,
which is really weird.
yeah, like I only look like a dweeby kid. I
Mhm.
only looked like a dweeby kid, and I only acted like a dweeby kid, and so I never got treated like. But you know, because that's the thing is, like, I mean,
But
and my cousins are wonderful. They're great. They're great. There's nothing wrong with them. But like, they got up to a little bit of very minor bullshit. No criminal record or anything like that. But like a lot of people, yeah, they got up to a little bit of shenanigans. So,
Well, so one of the big criticisms of that bias testing, that BS
oh yeah,
bias testing that they do
the implicit
is
bias test.
the implicit bias testing isn't just that it's not reliable. There's two
Well,
things you need to
first off,
take
the
into
name is
account.
wrong. Like, the name is begging the question,
Yeah.
because it assumes that implicit bias exists.
But
And then
even if it were reliable, like, because they found out it's not reliable, it can be gamed or it can change with every time you take the test. That's
yeah,
the construct
and
reliability is
they don't
important.
know
It
what it
fails
actually
that.
shows. Like, the other thing that
That's
it
the other
fails
thing
at.
is construct validity. And one of the things that's probably maybe true, you don't even know, but it's one of the concepts you need to take with anybody, is that because you have an initial flash thought of somebody, it does not give you have any sort of validity of how you actually carry out treating that person, or how quickly your mind might just suddenly adapt into something else as you go getting to know somebody. Like some quick heuristic, you might have some sort of little, I'm coming across somebody who's new to me or different to me or something, and I have some sort of initial thought. It does not say anything about what's going on 2 minutes later in an interaction, or even a lifetime later, you know.
Yeah, like, yeah, because I
But
kind of
this
related
is
at
one of
the
the differences between talking about racism like in a liberal sense and in this progressive theory sense, is the concept of falsification. Is that in the liberal world, that's one of the things people will try to like test you with. Like, didn't you know that there was racism in history? Don't you, like, you go start and saying that you don't agree with this stuff and say, so you're saying history wasn't
yeah.
racist, or our racism didn't happen,
Well, like, no,
or
for
there's not
example, like,
racism out there? And you're like, no, you say that with evidence it's true. But you can also falsify it without evidence. You can't say it's true, or evidence to the contrary. You can say it's not true, and that's the simple fact of it. Is that the Kendi and the Angelos and the deeper theorists of it want to say that it is always there, no matter what, and you can't falsify it. That's not. We're not
Yeah.
working in the realms of falsification.
Like I was just thinking, like the analogy, right, of happening now that happens to me all the time is, like the data is clear that police don't have a systemic racism problem in America. And immediately come back to like, well, are you saying there's no racism? Are you saying there's no such thing as police brutality? What do you think? They're all fine?
You're saying it. You're saying it never happened
Yeah,
either.
you're saying it never. Yeah, you're saying it never happens. Like, and like it's amazing to me again. Like this is one of those things where, like, in so many cases, I'm talking to people with college degrees.
Yeah. Well,
Like
this is what John's saying in this quote right here. Like there are people who just go along with this stuff, and they're amazingly intelligent and smart. And
I remember specifically. Like I specifically remember. I think it was fourth grade. So whatever that is, 10 years old, 10 years old. I remember in the fourth grade, and we did this little exercise on what's the difference between a fact and an opinion. And we did the little exercise, and I remember you circle F for fact and you circle O for opinion. And I remember having this moment of like, oh, this is interesting. They have names for differentiating between statements of fact and statements of opinion. And you can tell immediately by the structure of the sentence which one is which. Fast forward through my life to every single time a grown-up adult person says, well, that's just your opinion, as if that constitutes an argument. And I'm like, and I've always had this thing where it's like, wait, were you not there in the 10th grade or 4th grade? Like, I mean, I know there was other kids in class that day. Like, did you never learn that? Are you just pretending to be dumb? But like, that's the thing though. It's like, I know these people have the intellectual facility to understand that there is a whole spectrum of possibility between police are not systemically racist and nothing racist ever happens. And they just play that dumb, and they will play that dumb. And the thing is, like, and now at this point, we're not even talking about individuals playing that dumb. Basically, the entire Democratic Party is playing that dumb.
well, that brings back to what we really paused on. Is like, is John playing dumb that he knows that he's doing this stuff? Or
I think he is.
Yeah, I think he's
think
smart enough, and that's one of the things that how I was interacting with him when he was finally messaging me back and forth, was saying, John, I know you know what you're dodging and doing,
Yeah.
But
it's like that. I mean, I use that example all the time, but like you notice it with the Marxism and stuff. But like, once you learn enough about Scientology, you can hear when someone is a Scientologist, even when they're not saying anything about Scientology. Like, and the same thing with Mormons. Like, you can spot Mormons, like, and you can tell, like, they don't even have to be talking about the framework where they get their language. It's just like the language is there. Aha! I spotted you. And like,
people joke
that's
it's like
going on.
it's like getting woke to it or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's like I'm woke to when somebody's doing it. I'm not woke to thinking when somebody who doesn't like thinking that way at all when I'm talking with normal people, But
Well, I think it's
although
like,
this stuff seeps into everybody's life now,
it's the idea. Like, I think it's learned stupidity. I think there's a smarter way to put it, but like, it's that, it's this thing that the examples I use all the time is that, like, if you say to your friend, like, oh, I've been having a lot of headaches lately, and they say, well, your PTS from reading all of those U.S. magazine articles about Leah Remini. You're a Scientologist, If I say, like, oh, I'm having trouble making my money, making my gas bill, and somebody says, well, have you paid your tithing? You're a Mormon, and like when I say, like whatever, just something is, and then something out comes out like, well, the problem with capitalism is, like, okay, you're a communist, like. And like John Larson is doing this thing. He's like, well, I'm not political. I'm just, the same thing you say. I'm just coming from the substrate of truth. Like, except your language betrays that you're not. Like
exactly.
these are not ideas. Like
That's so much sand throwing in the eyes that way in kind of the current age. But one of the things I like to point to, well, like with critical race theory, the Colin Kaepernick, so many different people talk about how it's not being taught in schools, but other people say the praxis is being taught in schools. It's taught to the teachers, and then the teachers teach the precepts. But we have a million and one receipts on that sort of thing. But
yeah,
the when I try to explain to people what critical race theory is, because people frequently try to gaslight with that and say, what, you don't think history should be taught and dissected from a critical standpoint and
yeah,
talk about racism in history? I'm like, no, but really the ultimate, like, a best description of what it is like that Kaepernick Netflix show that just came out, and he's talking about the NFL is like slavery.
yeah,
So he doesn't say the word critical race theory when he does that. He's not getting into high level whoop did he do, even though
yeah.
I don't think the high
But
level stuff's that high
he
level.
doesn't quote Bell or Crenshaw or he
Yeah,
doesn't.
and people say it's PhD level academics. Like, even that stuff's not that hard. Come on. To
Yeah,
use John Larson's quote that love to use a million times over the years, like he said about Mormonism, this stuff is a million miles wide and an inch deep. But the Kaepernick never once says, "Hey, I'm going to do some critical race theory here." He just kind of puts these dumb ideas in this Netflix show. But it's also not saying, that show is not saying, "Hey, let's examine slavery." It's saying the NFL is slavery. That's critical race theory. Like
yeah,
w- you don't have to disagree that slavery happened to disagree with Kaepernick's stupid idea right there. And the nobody's denying that slavery happened. To say Kaepernick, that's stupid. Oh, so you're saying slavery never happened? Like that's the equivalent type of argument that they're making in
yeah.
those situations.
Well, then
And
of
so
course the other thing that makes me crazy about that is that all of these same people are effectively denying like 99% of the history of slavery,
yeah,
because the part that was run by in part by Europeans, they were only part of a triangle,
yeah,
like that's like in the entire totality of the history of racism, it's not even the major portion,
yeah.
but it's the only part they care about. And like I mean, like you can bring it up a million times in a million different ways because they say, well, America. The reason that America is successful is because of their history of slavery. It's like, well, then what's up with Africa?
So,
Like
so
the
yeah,
slavingest place in the world today. There's a place in the world today where the UN estimates between like I think it's like between 10 and 30% of people are born and die in chattel slavery. That place exists. It's real. It's a country. It's in Africa. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. And I stumbled onto this fact by like accident. Like this is one of the things that makes me so crazy about the world we live in is that everybody's talking about slavery all the time. I learned about the slavingest country in the world today. This is a country. This is the last country on earth to officially ban slavery, to outlaw slavery, in 1980, the year I was born. That's how recent this was. And like I discovered this fact because I was on Google Earth looking at little restaurants in sub-Saharan Africa because I like to see like what I just like some little shack somewhere in Lagos, Nigeria. Like they make food and they put pictures of it. I'm the kind of dork that likes to read that. But like so I was poking around Africa, and like I always do, I clicked on the thing and it takes me to the Wikipedia page. And like, how is it that I had to stumble on the fact that there is a place in the world today called Mauritania in West Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, where 10 to 30% of people there alive today live in chattel slavery. Now, I'd also like to point out it's one of the poorest countries in the world. The slavingest place in the world is also one of the poorest places in the world. So much for your theory about American success being attributable to history of slavery. Like they
well,
say that slavery ended 150 years ago, and we're still benefiting from that now.
I'm going to give you the arguments that I've seen, which is we have our own problems to worry about and deal with. And just because there's other problems in the world doesn't mean I can mention this problem. And I think, Flip, you should focus on the problem of not having enough empathy for Colin Kaepernick,
Oh, that's
because
right.
because that was like slavery. But I think the but that is ultimately what it is. It's something bad in history happened.
I want
Today's the same. And I saw John Larson. I have a clip of it. John Larson exactly did that. And I think he actually went to that because he saw me do a super chat criticizing him because he was talking about some negative racial things in history and him pointing out and saying, how dare you guys say these things didn't happen in history? And then I said that those critical race theories aren't about bad things happening in history. It's saying that you guys right now today are just as bad as those guys.
yeah.
And so then he went into that. He goes into, I grew up in Utah in the 70s and 80s, and it's just as bad as ever. And it's you know, he did the jump, the critical race theory jump. Was things were once bad and they never once got better.
Yeah, nothing has changed. I just had a really horrible, evil idea that we could crowdfund. Let's crowdfund a trip to Mauritania, and we'll do a screening of Colin Kaepernick's Netflix documentary for some actual people living in slavery, and see how they
You know,
react.
like right before that clip even comes, like he's talking and he's like sitting in like some lounge and somebody like brings him a drink and they give him a drink and he's sitting there with his like bougie drink. Like it's so dumb. But yeah, as he gets his 50 million from Nike that uses slave labor to
Yes. I mean, God damn it, there's like the layers of hypocrisy are just so astounding. It's really amazing.
yeah. Let's keep going with this one.
Taboo.
So it's not just as simple as you're an ass. It's not that simple.
Well, I mean,
It's
that
more-
helps.
Oh, it's funny.
It's like,
Ridicule.
it's like becoming the president of the United States. You have to have lots of money and a big mouth, right? So I don't have either. Well, I have one of those, not the other. Yeah, just the assholery helps. No, it's an important breaking taboos and those sort of things, an important part, because this conditioning is really super strong. You do not have to take my word for it. I could give you a list of 25 books by renowned psychologists. This is John, you're a renowned psychologist. Am I making this shit up?
No, you're not. Check out Luna Corbden's Recovering Agency. We have a 12-hour series on all the ways that high demand religions or cults use undue influence. But this is absolutely central.
Mm-hmm. So I think String's story is interesting. It's a tragedy. I don't, this poor guy. I don't, whatever. And the people who followed him, that there's victims on victims on victims on victims. So we're all religion, in my view, exploits weakness in human psychology, and it's an unmoved mover. It's
Not like Marxism.
No.
Marxism doesn't exploit weakness in human psychology, does it, John?
There's never been any ounce of any part of a different academic philosophy that has ever done that either.
Yeah. No, never. Boy, what? God
Well, we
damn.
keep going. There's just a little more.
that get in place.
Actually, there's a lot more. But
What's the?
I'm trying to get. It's like 147 is where we're trying to get to.
But real quick though, I wanted to say that what can John DeLynn be renowned for? He has never
He's renowned for this.
He has never expressed an original thought in his life.
Ex-Mormon stake.
I've never heard it.
Ex-Mormon stake presidency. That's famous. That's some psychology.
The saying, no one drop thinks it's responsible for the flood. No one drop of water thinks it's responsible. And that's why
systemic systems, man.
The Mormon church and these other things are so successful, because they're really hard to unwind. You think if Dallin Oaks got up today and said, I think it's all a fraud, it would fall apart? No. Everyone's been conditioned to take that. He would be destroyed. He would be ruined. He would lose things.
Pause that. Do you think if John McWhorter stood up and said critical race theory is all a lie, it would fall apart? No, wouldn't. It turns out it's a little too hard. It's a little too hard to unwind. Turns out it's very difficult to unwind critical race.
He'd get called a traitor. He'd get called a
Uncle Tom. Yeah. All right.
People like you and I, we who come up here, we suffer a little bit of blows, not anything major, but we are swimming upstream in this culture here.
No, you're not.
Not no more.
You are riding a goddamn inner tube down the fucking lazy fucking Jesus. swimming upstream. Fuck you.
You're riding in your tube down the lazy river. You guys are on the front of where the getting is good. You're on the front of it.
And people are conditioned not to hear what they don't want to hear. All of us. And I don't think this is because a lot of you listening have deconstructed Mormonism. Be careful. There are other movements that are pulling people in.
What was that?
Whoa, man, he was able to say, if you guys are deconstructing Mormonism, you might fall into MAGA. Is that what he's saying? Right there.
Yeah,
That's a tendency. That's the thing you might fall. Most people who deconstruct Mormonism fall into MAGA.
Because and what does MAGA? The words mean "Make America Great Again." Okay, it was a political slogan for a Republican presidential campaign. All right, like what does MAGA mean, John? Like, it's not like Black Lives Matter where they tell us exactly what it's all about. Like, as far as I can tell, most of the worst things you have to say about MAGA are things that you are imposing on the entire group on the basis of some crappy people. The vast majority of MAGA hat wearing people believed in the "Make America Great Again" thing, and none of this bullshit
they're just
that you're
boomer
writing against.
conservative types.
They're traditional conservatives.
Or actually, I mean, I do know a lot of younger type guys who just liked it too. For it's like kind of like wrestling kayfabe type.
Yeah, no, that too. Yeah, I mean, it became kind of farcical anyway. But yeah, like here, John Larson is pretending that MAGA represents some particular set of ideas. It doesn't. Not in the way that BLM
beyond
and
that
Antifa.
though, and it comes up a couple times here, is like he's giving like a concession. Like he's saying, gee, people who deconstruct Mormonism, they can still fall into stuff too.
Oh.
And then he says MAGA. It's like that's not the problem. Like people who deconstruct Mormonism don't accidentally fall into MAGA. That's not the tendency. What is the tendency? What sort of strange worldviews are the tendency for people to deconstruct things? What is their next cult of choice, if you're going to call things
Mormons?
It's not MAGA.
Mormons were already MAGA, John.
Yeah, that's the
They're
point.
predominantly Republicans.
So it's like he's acting like he's given like this, you know, I'm going to give you like a both sides thing of talk about, like, even though you're leaving Mormonism, you might fall into something else stupid.
Yeah.
And the choice is MAGA right there.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of a mask off thing where it's like, oh, in case it wasn't clear, John, where your political cult, where you fit in the political cult landscape, now it's clear. Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, I said MAGA. Yeah, MAGA. I'm talking to you guys.
Oh, hardcore. Hardcore.
Like that's, I mean, like
coming at him live.
Who are the MAGA people watching Mormon Stories? Like, no, John. Like, they're not interested in this stuff. They're doing other shit.
It's all right though too, because we're coming at these guys hard. None of these guys are gonna listen this far into anything like this. They're oh, you're cutting me down. I'm not gonna. Like, if anybody starts listening to us take these guys down, it's gonna be
MAGA guys. It'll be MAGA guys.
It won't be MAGA guys, because it might be some MAGA guys, but it'll be Mormon people who probably, like, these guys kind of constantly, every once in a while, they'll give some recognition that not all Mormons, they'll even just kind of say it like that, are MAGA, but they frequently want to paint all Mormons as if they are MAGA, and that's not the Mormonism in Salt Lake that I know right now.
It's the oh no, he's one of the good ones.
Yeah,
that's they're like it. I mean, that's everything is like they are 100% all of the things they claim to be deconstructing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and he's right here in the process of saying, stop and think about it yourself. And this is the point where I sent my first text. I think I have it saved in there somewhere that I said, try for 1 second. Please just try for 1 second. See how you are doing this yourself. And then he says, what are you talking about? Like, I have the receipts that he's immediately like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I'm just I have all the access to truth, and I'm just talking truths.
You're a cult. So
Oh
there's
my
a
God.
there's a it has to happen one time in the episode. There are
that against this culture, that's swimming such against culture. That's such a difficult thing to say.
Oh my God, yeah.
Man,
So
it's
brave, so brave.
brave.
others
These
here.
views are not necessarily representative of the Open Stories Foundation.
I'm going to call your bullshit. Are you really defending MAGA?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Oh,
but-
so
but-
what was that? What was that right there?
Is that
That's-
different?
There are movements on the left that are equally, I don't want to sound like I'm just again, there are movements on the right, there are movements on the left. We are susceptible to false information, and we're susceptible to false information such a degree that when it is demonstrated to be false, I'll use QAnon. I was watching.
It's like every time you think he's gonna zig, he just stays on the zag. You know what I mean?
The other thing, like QAnon, like I don't want to understate how stupid and silly and dangerous they are, but like it's such low hanging fruit.
But at the same time, too, it's like that's like a double. That's 2 times in a row that he baits and switch. He's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to also maybe mention how the other side goes too far.
And then
I'm gonna go to the other side to go too far. Like QAnon. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And then if I tell him like, hey, try to tell me, you tell me. That's literally what it is. You tell me, where does the left go too far? You say it. Nothing.
Say the words. Yeah, exactly.
Watching a little interview with a QAnon adherent who believes, as some QAnon adherents believe now, who believes that Donald Trump is still the president of the United States, because one of QAnon's big beliefs was that he was going to be reinstated, that there was this big movement against the pedophiles and all that kind of stuff, and that he was going to be reinstated. And there was an interview with one of these guys, and they presented the question, well, then was Donald Trump responsible for the pullout in Afghanistan?
Oops.
He literally just couldn't answer. It broke his firmware.
Or the vaccine.
He could.
My contention, John
So
and John,
ironic.
my contention is I can break your firmware. I can break your firmware in. I'll reel it in. I'll say 10 different areas. But even in some of those cases, you're probably aware of where I can break your firmware. You just don't want to have to address it because you're having to play up to those orthodoxies for your crowds.
Yeah, like we know he's aware. So for example, when he says like, oh, there are political cults on the left. Okay, John. Like the fact that you say that and then like don't mention it.
Think about how many times, we'll go with that exact same thing. How many times we could have broken firmware when these guys were head deep in talking about Trump being a Russian, a Russian bot or a Russian spy. There's 1,001 different times that should have broken your firmware over the past several years. It should be breaking it right now as it's becoming finally admitted in the mainstream media, but it should have broken your firmware in the same ways of like, okay, so if Trump is a Russian spy, how come even NPR says that he's had a stronger reaction towards Putin and Russia in his time in office than his predecessors?
Well, I mean, you would think that a basic education in DNA and biology and evolutionary psychology would break any racial essentialist worldview.
Yeah.
But like, John, do you not know about DNA? Because you still talk about race as though it's real. So like,
well, then
what's
you got
the
the
deal?
structural determinism, but
Oh, that's right.
if you say the structural determinism, I mean, I bet you he'd be able to, like if you posited that thing to him, he'd say, I don't know these theories you're talking about. Well, what about race and DNA? Structural determinism. Oh, you didn't know about these theories, John. Like that's what I bet would happen.
Yeah.
You know? He wouldn't use the term structural determinism, but he'd have all the answers of structural determinism. And like he'd explain out structural determinism without saying just structural determinism.
I mean,
like,
as earlier he said,
John, you're not an advocate of these theories.
What was the thing earlier? He misdefined a word by saying it was power, or like I don't even remember what word it was because they use that for so many words. But
He just
like
said politics for power. That's
something
what
like that. No,
earlier.
yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, politics means power. Like, what? No, okay.
Yeah.
uh,
You could see his
Said the substrate of all politics for power. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah.
eye. It's like a cartoon. His eyes start spinning around. I'm not making fun of this person. We are all that
Yeah.
person. There are truths that we have been conditioned not to want to confront. There's lies we tell ourselves, and we all have to. And it's really easy to point fingers at MAGA. It's really easy to point fingers at the Mormons. But the real trick is to look inside.
Yeah.
Watch this. They're going to show how to look inside.
I see it all the time. I see so many ex-Mormons leave Mormonism and then acquire just new magic worldviews.
Here comes a new magic worldview. They're gonna give us an example of a new magic worldview that happens after people leave Mormonism.
Sometimes just as disturbing, if not more disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple friends that are ER docs here in Utah and in Nevada, and they're telling these stories now of these patients coming in. They come into the ER room, or they come into the emergency room. They say, "I'm dying. Help me." The doctor says, "Okay, let me figure out what's going on." Does a test, got COVID. They didn't get vaccinated. They're in the intensive care unit getting intubated, and they're arguing with the doctor saying, "I don't have COVID. You're lying. This is a conspiracy. Somebody's paying you to diagnose me with COVID when I don't really have it. I refuse to believe that I have COVID." And they come to the ER dying, and many of them die.
This is their example.
You leave Mormonism,
and you become a COVID denier. It's just that every time they know that they're going back to Mormon examples, they just, or what they think would be Mormon examples, because like I bet you even those anecdotes are dubious, but they keep acting like they're going to give an example of how the left goes too far, and they keep doubling back in.
Well, and like, I mean, I forgot to mention it earlier because I mean it's only tangentially related, but Bill Maher has been an anti-vaxxer for decades.
Yeah.
And he's never been Mormon, John.
but it's to me it's just more that like they know that they can't, even if they knew left-wing examples, because John acted like to me that he didn't even know any. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, like, well, no,
but then they keep
he says here that they exist, but then
they keep giving the lip service to it here, and then when they kind of act like they're going to give an example of one, they double back into a right-wing one.
And also like, I mean, it's also so disconnected. Like, okay, are these even Mormons? You say he's an ER doc. Is he asking them, "Oh, are you Mormon? What's your blood pressure? You know, like, what's your blood type?" Like, no. What do you mean? Like, how's this even related to Mormonism? Is the ER doctor Mormon? The fuck are you talking about, John DeLynn?
Yeah, and so like I bet you if you pushed them or something, you really like held their feet to the fire, you could make them give some actual example of, oh, I mean, people like crystals or horoscopes or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But they won't get into something that is explicitly a left-wing.
Yeah. So Lindsay Park, she left Mormonism, and she now believes in a bizarre conspiracy theory that says that all of society and history is structured from the top down to benefit men at the expense of women.
Well,
is that a weird idea?
I'd say that's one of the central themes of this entire podcast channel. But
Yeah.
keep going.
There you go.
Arguing with the doctor as they take their last breath.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
Yeah, it's really sad because COVID is a terrible way to die. It really is.
Compared to
they suffocate to death, and it's miserable. It's misery, and it gives me so much pain to see the amount of suffering that's happening that doesn't have to. But it also helps us understand just how susceptible and vulnerable humankind is to misinformation, how cautious we have to be, and just committed to being to really being careful.
Yeah.
And maybe we should address the do your own research thing.
Yeah, I want to do some research.
You've got to be careful.
I don't. What
research.
do you think?
You've got to understand
This
what you're
is
looking at.
it's slightly self-aware.
One of the reasons I've been successful in learning Mormon history is I pay very close attention to who the author is, what's their bias, where are they writing from.
The that that was the entirety of the clip. I mean, I think it keeps
Yeah.
going, but
Yeah.
the
Like, I'm just curious right off the bat,
I think it's
Mr.
funny because
Research.
like the whole entire post-Mormon world comes from doing your own research when you're told not to, and I think he's kind of aware of that, right? When he starts,
Yeah. But like, I mean, I'm just curious because I don't know, but I've seen enough to wonder: is the vaccination rate amongst Mormons lower or higher than the rate amongst, say, Mexican immigrants or inner city black people? You know, because like we have the data, they've told us already that, that blacks and Hispanics are way behind everyone else in the country in vaccination rates. What does that have to do with Mormonism or politics, John? Both of you dipshits.
we're supposed to criticize systems, not people.
Oh, that's right.
We're supposed to criticize their systems of dodging their own cognitive biases and
Yeah, like, oh, just people leave the church and don't believe in COVID. Okay, what the? I can't believe that. It's so strange.
it's just because they know. It's just like when I was challenging him underneath the thing to give me an example, because I know he can give an example. He also says, "Tell me what orthodoxies I'm afraid of." And the simple fact is that I bet you he can give examples. I bet you he
Yeah,
can. There's part of me that kind of wonders if he's become full true believer in this stuff, or I bet you if you did go have that beer with him, he would be willing to falsify certain things you're not allowed to falsify
yeah.
in those new paradigms, but he doesn't want to do it publicly because he's afraid of the orthodoxies that
See,
he profits from.
yeah. Well, because in the comments, right? For example, some people said it to you, some people said it to me. Like, like there's a couple of people commented, just like, and it's so funny. They're so proud of themselves. MAGA is a political cult, and you replied, and I replied, MAGA, yes, MAGA
Sure.
is a political cult. Sure. Is BLM a political cult? Why or why not? Crickets. They won't answer. Like, so I mean, it's obviously, I mean, because in the comments it was you and I, and then a bunch of people that were just little Johns doing the same sand throwing stuff, or the same. I lay down the challenge. I reply to the challenge. Crickets.
I'm being harassed. Don't
That or I'm
like
being harassed, or
I'm
like,
being
or
trolled.
oh no, that was the other thing. It's like you and I both were we were told by strangers that this is typical right-wing Mormon shit. When we are lefties that have been out of the church for decades,
Yeah.
like they're not just wrong; they have it exactly opposite wrong. And then you point it out to them, crickets. Like,
Well, did you see the because somebody like that would look at like what the videos that I had coming up on deck, and there was Adam and Sitch. Those guys are both left wing, but they were talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff, and they obviously have a view of that, so that must be right wing. There was a Shapiro video, so that must be right wing. There was something on deck from Fox News, so that must be right
that's all right
right
when yeah,
wing.
yeah.
But um I saw that Bill Maher thing. I pulled a clip from Fox News because they had it condensed down to like the couple little clips. But I saw that on CNN, and I've watched plenty of Maddow over the years, enough to make my eyes bleed. And
Yeah.
the 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 whole deal, it came up in like a recent debate, and everybody should go watch the debate. It was a myth informed Milwaukee debate about. It might not have been this debate. There was a couple debates, but there was a critical race theory debate there, and it was brought up in the debate that there's been several studies that pretty much demonstrate out and out that people on the left wing, people on the right wing know and can tell and predict the answers to questions that left wingers have, and left wingers don't know
Yeah.
crap about what right wingers actually think.
Yeah, no, they've done a few different versions of this, and yeah, it has shown that self-described right wingers are better at explaining left-wing positions than the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which
So
is like it's kind of related to that thing where they, like like atheists know more about the Bible than Christians.
Yeah, and this really does exactly. That's exactly kind of what we're trying to point out to
That's
Larson and to Lynn. Because I said on the very first podcast I appeared with Streeter, one of the things I said is like sometimes what I'm getting swarmed about and I'm arguing to people about is about a position that I don't hold. I'm telling them a position that they're getting wrong about somebody else. Like
yeah,
I know you guys are saying the wrong position of what this other person's position is. And just like you kind of did with the MAGA people, you're no MAGA dude, but you can explain a MAGA person's point of view a million times better than Larson can. And I bet you Larson's spent hours upon hours stressing about MAGA, like sitting there thinking about like, and you can describe MAGA
well,
better than he could ever describe.
yeah,
Like,
no, and it's obvious. Like, I mean, the way he talks about January 6th, just it explodes it all. You know?
yeah, that's one of the things I told him on those back and forth emails. I said, I think you only have like a propagandist view from MSNBC of what right wingers think.
Yeah,
And one of the things that happened to me, one of the reasons that all this stuff kind of blew up in my face is the the day Trump got elected, it blew my mind. It I mean, I kind of knew for years some of this
I was shocked. I was stunned. I was not expecting that.
and I thought for sure it wasn't going to happen. All along, I thought it was going to happen. It was one of the times I was the most wrong in my life. I didn't even think he'd get the nominee, but then by the time he got voted in, I was like, "Holy crap!" And there was like a part of me, there was a part of me that said, "I got to figure out why this happened." And I think over the past 4 years, the whole entire left, instead of saying why did this happen, they cocked their heads back and said the prayer, why did this happen? But then they never actually went and looked into like why did this happen or try to
Yeah,
understand any sort of point or look into any sort of thing. Barry Weiss talks about this when she got hired at the New York Times. It was ostensibly to be somebody, and it's even kind of funny that they could only hire her to be the speaker for what right wing thought was, because she's nowhere near that. But even she got chased out of there for trying to explain to them what the thought was. There's this really good video that was just put out recently by Stephen Michael Davis about how the whole entire Anthony Weiner saga leading up to that election might be the whole entire reason Trump got elected. And one of the issues that happened with that whole entire thing uh, is that there wasn't an ounce of self-reflection like done by people on the left side when Trump got voted. And like, did we cause this at all? Did who we put up? Did it in any way, shape, or form? Did we? Nope. It was just the baddies made this happen, and the baddies did this, and we got to go get the
yeah,
baddies, and we got to upend all of our liberal principles to get the baddies,
yeah.
because in the face of a monster, we must become monsters to fight the monster. But
It's the Principal Skinner thing. You know, like, is it me? No, it's the children that are wrong.
yeah, so
Yeah,
in that process, I started like I learned a whole lot about what people actually thought from that side, and it kind of blew my mind. And then as stuff went on, it was somewhere like around like the Kavanaugh trials or something like that that I really, really, really realized how much lying was going on. And so I mentioned in the back and forth with John Larson there that he keeps talking QAnon, that he should look into Blue Anon, which is kind of like the meme style comeback at the QAnon stuff. But there has
yeah,
been several things over the past several years that you should have just as much detail as a QAnon person does to let you know that some sort of thing that you're holding on to as truth is not true. And you're holding on to a hallucination, and you're being Don Quixote fighting windmills. And
yeah,
all like right now, it's just coming out in mainstream media a little bit about how full of crap like the Russian dossier stuff was. You could have known about that in 2017. And
Well, no, I mean that's the thing is like that there were right wing that within days pointed out like the provenance of this thing is no good, guys. You
yeah,
know, and they were called right wing conspiracy theorists for
yeah,
saying that the Steele dossier is not good information, right? Like, and I know this is the thing about this that makes me like the Rittenhouse thing is one of the best examples. Is like, I mean, like Anna Kasparin on the Young Turks, like after a year of lying about Kyle Rittenhouse, comes out and says, by the way, I just watched the video. You know,
If you
and that's
and
just
if
like,
you do your own research, John Larson, you could have
yeah,
seen that video on Twitter the night it happened.
yeah. Like another example was that like the Covington kids. The Covington kids story was blown up by Reddit within 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Took 30 minutes for Reddit to go, oh, the kids didn't approach the Native American guy. The Native American guy approached them. The kids weren't shouting anything racist. In fact, there was 4 black guys in the background hurling racist abuse at the kids. Like
Yeah.
and like this was all within 30 minutes on Reddit. Any stupid asshole could go and see, and then but the
That
next
day
day CNN is lying about it.
that day I learned, I mean, that day I found that out within a half an hour because almost any sort of claim or thing you see pop up, Flip and I are usually back and forth with each other and stuff like this. And it's like, what have you heard? What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you seen? And we go
Yeah.
find out, doing our own research, what the details are on any sort of situation. And you'd be surprised if you just kind of like compare it to how things shake out in reality, like over time. Like it shook out in reality that the Christopher Steele dossier was a bunch of crap. Another one, this one is kind of a strange one because I watched Trump's talk after the
Charlottesville?
Charlottesville. I
Me
saw it
too.
live.
I
I
did
heard
too.
him. I heard him say, "I'm not talking about those white supremacists" live.
I heard
And
him say that.
the
I
next
also watched it
day,
live.
when the new narrative got put in place, it just blew my mind because like I'd heard what he said and like, what are you guys
And
talking about?
I
And
remember having the thought like, well, this can't last. Like
yeah,
obviously,
well, Scott
obviously
Adams,
it should take about a 24-hour news cycle for it to be obvious enough to anyone who didn't see for themselves that Donald Trump did not call white supremacists fine people. That he
it
in fact
lasted
said the
through
opposite.
the election 3 years later.
It's still going. They're still like all last year during all the riots. Why are you doing this? One of the reasons given because we have a president who thinks that white supremacy. They that's their motivation. They said so.
And Scott Adams had a cognitive dissonance. He called it the Charlottesville hoax funnel.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, give this to your friend, give this to your friend, and have them read it out loud and watch their face while they read it.
yeah,
And you could see them sit there and read the thing, and you can watch that little moment John Larson was talking about his MAGA friend having. And Scott Adams was like, maybe could some of you record this or just watch it? Like, tell us what happens when
yeah,
they go through this thing. And I had a lot of different people that I showed them that or went through the thing, and they still held on to it. They still,
yeah.
I know what Trump said. I know what he said.
Well, no, it's just like John or just like Scott Adams in that the Find People Hoax Funnel article. Like he describes how like well the next thing they'll do is they'll say well he should have said something different like like it's
They
pretty
won't
much what you
stop
say
and
like
say, wait a minute, I
they
sat and believed something completely
yeah
wrong for 3 years of my life.
yeah because the other thing is that like and this is where the media plays their role is that people can jump to it's like well it doesn't matter if this case he said he condemned white supremacists unequivocally because we know he said this stuff so many other times which are all also entirely imaginary. I mean like I don't know where it was it's been a while but somebody made like a super cut of literally like
How many times
25
he said it
years
and did
like
it.
no going back to the 90s of Donald Trump shitting on white supremacists like but none of it matters because that's things they created QAnon cult John Larson you guys created a boogeyman like
Yeah.
and now and you've spent the last 5 years fighting him
Yep.
Don Quixote
Yep. You guys made the windmills.
yeah
Um, and the bottom line of it is the person's fault for losing that election was Hillary Clinton's fault. Like she should
oh
have
yeah
won it easily. Like
I
it didn't get won because Trump pulled some super magical trick or some sort of thing. Watch the Stephen Michael Davis video on Anthony Weiner and see how much that actually played down towards the last little 10,000 votes of difference that happened in 3 states that
yeah
and how ridiculous it was that he went through that whole process, that process ended up bringing back up the emails, it ended up bringing back up the FBI investigation all at the wrong time, Anthony Weiner showing off his wiener to people really might have altered the whole entire election, and it's all on them. It's their own dumb fault.
Yeah.
And then
I need to watch that. I don't know about that because like I always went with the like. I mean, it's an
that's just
opinion.
one thing, because like you could say Hillary Clinton could have done better too if she wasn't a career criminal. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, well, yeah, because like I always. Well, I mean, that's things. Being a career criminal has never stopped anybody from attaining
exactly.
high office.
But
But like,
what I'm
because I in my estimation, like I can't prove this, but it's like just it's my take. Like I always thought that like if Hillary lost it at any moment, it was the basket of deplorables.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
like
so I had dinner. This is one of the last times I ended up hanging out with Lindsay Hansen Park, because stuff started going south soon after that. And at the time frame, I was just as shocked as anybody, and almost like in a daze that Trump won, because I didn't understand the world that was around me, because I'd been filled up with a bunch of crap. But we went to dinner, and she said at dinner that this is just a reaffirmation proof of sexism. You know what I mean? And I disagreed. I was like, well, no, I don't think Hillary represents females very well. You know what I mean? Like I don't agree with that line of thought, just based off of the sense of you're putting Hillary Clinton in as the avatar of all females. Like
yeah.
that's the worst possible person to be the end all judge of what, if we're going to vote female or male.
Yeah, if you want to put somebody up as an example of a great female, don't pick Hillary Clinton.
But at that time frame, we were able to like chit chat and all that stuff about it. It actually kind of came out more later that she got really divisive about talking about border stuff, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah. No,
that's
that's kind of what that was my final blow up with Lindsay was that
I think it was both of ours, just
it was the border thing. Yeah.
that it just got so hyperbolic, and one of my issues with that whole entire time, and all you had to do is wait for it to find out, is that nobody's going to be better on it. Nobody's going to fix that world. If you don't know what a pollero is, shut up about the borders. If you don't know like what actually happens with the people who come from the Mexican side, and how hardcore it is watched, like that border is watched on the Mexican side 10,000 times stronger than it is on the American side. And what you got to go through to even get there, just ask for more people to risk going through that disaster.
Yeah.
You know, at least from that end. But
Yeah. No, I mean, but because also, and that's the crux of what my contention with her back on that point was like, first off, you know, you're wrong about the facts, number one. But secondly, you don't get to pretend to be compassionate when I know what you really think and believe about the world. And I use that specific example because, you know, like I remember specifically the thing she said was some, you know, finger wagging church lady thing is, how can anybody call themselves moral and be okay with separating
parents from their kids, and
parents from
then
their kids? And I'm like, well, Lindsay, you're a feminist. And so let's talk about the government.
I know about some types of legislation
I know
that
about
might
the
concern
family law system,
you. Yeah.
Lindsay Park.
But
And I have to tell you that you are very much on board with the government helping people separate children from parents, you know? And then obviously that all exploded and that's how that ended. But
that one also, that one became an issue for me, because that was where she'd get into the concepts of silence is violence. And if
yeah,
anybody's not also commenting on this full-throatedly, you are part of the problem. Fine. If I'm supposed to talk up, because I'm fine being silent, I'm fine being quiet, I got just letting this thing go and seeing how it plays out. If I'm supposed to speak up, fine, I'll speak up. You're overreacting. You're
yeah,
getting swung around and by some propaganda and some BS and some framings of some things that are just completely being used as a bludgeon to try to
yeah,
whip up your sentimentality, and you don't know what's going on there. You do
yeah,
not know how to fix what's going on there.
yeah. And also there's the not inconsequential fact that you didn't give a shit about this when Obama did it.
Yeah, well, that's the
You
whole
didn't
point.
even know it existed when Obama did it, and if you did, you didn't give up.
Biggest
Your
deal in the
politics are
world.
transferred. Yeah, it's totally. Well, no, it's less of a deal now that like it's better now. Like I mean,
And it's even worse now, because
yeah,
Well, they say,
Was it?
well, Biden wants to do stuff like pay the money, but the simple fact that you are attracting more people to that border, you are attracting more people to go through that, to
Yeah.
get to rape themselves right through the system into the U.S.
Yeah.
So,
Oh God. Uh, it's just too much stupid. You know, and that's again, I mean, another one of these things that makes me so crazy about these people is that Lindsay Park lectures me about compassion and stuff for immigrants, where it's like, you know, COVID before Christmas, I had a DACA baby on my lap that is a blood relative. like,
yeah,
I'm very, very connected to the whole immigration scene. You know, I'm a Latin American,
yeah.
and like
Well,
and
my girlfriend's a political refugee, but if we talk about this, it's like saying we have a black friend.
oh, no, so we're recentering the conversation. That's the other thing is we're recentering the conversation on the wrong types of injustice. But yeah, like it just yeah, to have Lindsay Park, little pretty white girl from Midvale, you know, like the worst thing that ever happened to her was she found out Mormonism wasn't true. You know, like, and then she made a career out of that life. Like lots of people have the trauma of leaving Mormonism and just have to go on with their miserable existence. She got to turn it into a career, you know, and it's like, oh, it's just, and yeah, like with Johns, I mean, the Johns, it's one of the things about these people that's just so obnoxious is that like the woe is me, the oppression, all this talk where it's like, God damn it, you guys are at the top of civilization. Like, every one of you is at the top of civilization, and every one of you is being handed all you have by the evil, oppressive, structural structures of structures
They've got
that
to dismantle it,
that you're
man.
that you're dismantling. Oh God.
They're actively dismantling it by telling us to watch our conspicuous capitalism and send them money.
I know. That's the best. Every time they ask for money. Oh God. I don't know how they don't feel any shame. But I guess I do. I when they sit on your pile of money, you feel less shame. Like,
Well, if you're a freedom fighter, man, you're
that's one of
you're
those things like I do like Ben Shapiro does that is funny where he just owns it. Where you know when people say like, "Well, how do you sleep at night?" You know, it's like on a giant pile of money. Well, he's honest about it. He tells the truth. You know, it's like John the Lynn. Why is it such a big contentious secret how much money you earn from Mormon Stories?
Well, he says lately he's been trying to act like it's all up on the up and up, and he only makes a certain amount of money, and he took no wage for 15 years. And that's such that can't be true.
No.
Kate Kelly says on the Midnight Mormons thing, look off the books, like stop taking his word for stuff of like what's on the books.
Yeah, well,
But
it's a lot like when they say, "Oh, the apostles aren't paid.
yeah,
They aren't paid a wage." Like, well, they're not paid a wage. They're paid a stipend, and they're given housing, and their transport is paid for. And like,
but
yeah, like
here's the flip end of all of that is like I wouldn't take the Kate Kelly line of you guys shouldn't make money for producing entertainment level talks
no,
or whatever. Like, make your money. Stop being hypocrites about like the whole thing.
yeah,
Stop pretending like you aren't already deconstructed, or drop the line of pretending like you get and understand and follow the deconstruction crap. You know.
yeah. Because I think because that's one of the like it's funny like they'll say it as an insult like, well, Ben Shapiro just wants to make money, and Ben Shapiro says like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're not
Part is
kidding.
like, yeah,
Like,
Delenn and Larson, go make your money. Just like get off of
yeah,
pretending to be freedom fighters against the
yeah.
concept.
Like yeah, Ben Shapiro is totally open about this. Like I say what I think. People want to listen to me.
But
They
that's been
give
the
me
game.
money.
That's been the game for 10 years is like the right wing, maybe going back to Fox. And I'll even like you might point your finger at Fox, but maybe it was always going to go this way of saying like you guys are the first ones to kind of really say, hey, we're going to have a slant from this slant over here and no more
Yeah,
of this. But and now everybody just does it, although there's still people pretending to not have a slant that have obvious slants, and you'll see far more on the right wing side of it, people announcing out now, this is what my stance
yeah,
is, I'm coming from this angle. And
yeah.
then the
No,
left
like
wing, you have way more of what John and John are doing, this pretending like
No, exactly.
they're just above it all and they're only speaking to objective truth.
Yeah, no, like Shapiro and Crowder say we are conservatives. This show analyzes things as from by conservatives from a conservative perspective. That's what they do, and they're honest about it. John and John are like they're lying, and that's it. CNN, New York Times, they're all super duper lefty, but they won't cop to it. They say, "Oh no, 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 we're common sense," unless Bill Maher brings up the term, in which case that's not a real concept.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can get postmodern, the whole concept of saying that there's no such thing as objectivity, but I do think that there have been people over time who have done better at objectivity. The simple fact of even covering anything or not covering it is a subjective um a subjective substrate, just the
Yeah,
fact that you're even looking at anything is going to is going to give away a bias. But I think through history there have been some places, and even some of those channels like Fox or CNN sometimes have like certain shows, like one individual show is much better about just kind of giving out facts and instead of
well,
but
that's the other thing is that I mean, with a lot of the talk about Fox, it's not entirely accurate anyway, because like the actual Fox news, the
yeah,
news part of the news is pretty news.
yeah,
It's in all the entertainment commentary shows around the news that they get all get all weird and wild. Um, but yeah, again though, the lefty alphabet networks, they're way fuzzier about that.
yeah, they
Um,
pretend like
I mean, like
they're
one
just
of the things
truth.
like with like Ahmaud Arbery, like it seems to me from the moment I watched that video till now, I've had the exact same question. Is like, well, what exactly are the laws about a citizen's arrest? How would that all shake down? And but like I watched that video as soon as it happened. It was available within 30 minutes. And like and in the video, I'm like, oh wow, he Aubrey tries to grab the gun and punches the guy in the head half a dozen times, or I don't know, a few times. And I'm like, gosh, boy, that sure complicates this. Nobody in the media has mentioned it. Like,
Yeah,
not one of them mentioned, like, yeah, the video, like they said, like the video shows evil white people pursuing and trapping the man who was just jogging. Like
yeah, that whole jogging narrative is one of the
they'll fill in all their little narrative, and they just leave out the not inconsequential detail that Aubrey appears to have assaulted one of these. Now, obviously, it all depends on the legality of the stop and all
those
that
guys
shit.
will probably
But
get they'll probably get convicted, but
well,
the
I just saw a thing where the judge's jury instructions look like, I mean, it's the way the judge frames the law, and it's a guilty. I don't know, but things
yeah,
like
but
same thing with
it's ridiculous at the same time to think that the whole situation just came from two guys
yeah.
wanting to shoot a jogger.
Yeah,
Like,
no, you
that's
see,
not the
in
case,
America,
even if they get convicted, even if maybe they rightfully get convicted because the laws go that way, but
yeah, no,
the
this was never,
situation came from a guy constantly them thinking, and probably true, that this guy was constantly casing and robbing things in that neighborhood, and
yeah.
them confronting him, and then it getting out of hand, and maybe they were in that state over the legal, lines doing that.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, like, obviously, the media has been entirely, I mean, the left wing media has been entirely deceptive about it, and they did the same
Well,
thing to
and
Kyle.
they
They did the
want to
exact same
build
thing
up
to
a riot.
Rittenhouse.
They want to build up the discontent in the middle of the whole
Yeah,
thing. They wanna
the best thing that could happen to CNN tonight is for another Kyle Rittenhouse to happen. Like that, this is the thing that's so sick about these people. The best thing that can happen to these people is that another black guy is shot in questionable circumstances. It's like they love this shit, and
well,
that's which is
I'm gonna
why they
say
turn them into nightmares.
anything that helps reinforce your narrative, if your whole world's narrative building.
Like I believe that. Like, and I'm not saying that like they are necessarily that nefarious. I'm not saying that they're that consciously evil. It's just that like their worldview, they goddamn, that's exactly what we needed to perpetuate our weird worldview. But oh man, yeah, that we should do a whole other podcast on this question about suicides, because and like I'd really like to dig up some data if we can, but like you say, it's so hard to get any raw data. Like all you can do is find the people who have like, well, this is what we found out
Not
about
if
gays.
you're a narrative building activist. Like that's one of the videos I had pulled up in the. I did a podcast with my other friend, and we bagged it because it didn't come out so great. But the one of the videos I pulled out is Jonathan Haidt's video from 2016 talking about how truth and activism always collide. And I think even just kind of like hearing that from the first time, you kind of go, well, I can sort of see it. But like really, if you start teasing it out, Michael Shermer just had a good article on how he wasn't allowed to talk about certain things in certain science articles just because it didn't go along with the activism. And that's just
Yeah.
little ways. Like it gets worse in bigger ways. Like if we get into detail about how much lying goes on around the Innocence Project and
Yeah.
how much lying happens just for any sort of, if you got a baby and a sacred belief and a sacred thing and empathy for some sort of supposed infantilized class, you will start lying your pants off to make your case.
Yeah, well, no, we know that because of the Rittenhouse thing. They lied. That's another one of those things where, like, within an hour, all of the video was on Reddit, and what happened was pretty damn clear. Like, and that's what's funny is because, like, and I'm one of those guys who I'm always like, I'm gonna wait for evidence. I'd rather wait for evidence, but there could be other stuff that comes out. This is one of those cases, like, every piece of evidence came out just confirmed that Kyle Rittenhouse is totally innocent.
Yeah, and if you didn't do your own research, if you just like took in John Larson approved media, there's some people who did that the whole past year and thought that guy just like went and opened fire on a bunch of black protesters.
No, they believe that he is a known white supremacist member of a white ring militia who traveled across state lines. I love that thing. And went and carried an illegally obtained gun into a crowd of peaceful protesters and opened fire. That's
Opened fire like an active shooter and killed a
yeah.
bunch of Black Lives Matters
Matter
protesters.
protesters. Yeah,
They're black. Like they'll mix that in with the Black Lives Matters protesters. You can tell they're trying to link
yeah,
it as that they were possibly black people.
yeah. No,
Mm.
it's all perfectly shameless. And that's the thing that so terrifies me is when I was a little kid and I'd read all about World War II and I'd be like, how did a country like like a lot of people point out is that like Germany in the 1930s was probably the most educated country on planet Earth, the most educated society on Earth. Like it
Yeah, it
was
takes smartness to do stuff because one of the freakiest parts about this stuff is that the theories that I'm claiming Larson's gotten some sort of inculcation into now is that if we confront them on any sort of these stats or data or evidences, these super smart theories have theorized away why that doesn't matter. They've put big giant words and construals and 2 + 2 = 5 postmodern language behind why there should be data justice and why evidence is a construct of hegemony and that's the freaky part of it is how many ostensibly smart people have put a what I would put like a religious tier um, theology laid out in detail of why the logical positivism that they love to stand on and beat their chests about so hard when taking down Mormonism, when it goes and pushes into their activism, there's all the words in the world laid out in front of you by smart people on why that doesn't count.
yeah. No, one of the first times I'll never forget the first time I encountered. Actually, I don't know. It's been so many times, but that like the recentering. Where like because like that is like a big part of I guess like my journey was that because like um it was through Lindsay Park that I was first directly exposed to a lot of this critical theory type feminism, the intersectional type feminism stuff. And like I remember it was Lindsay was the first time I ever heard oh, the patriarchy hurts men too. You know, and I heard about like, oh yeah, systemic, you know, I learned about victim blaming. I learned about victim blaming from Lindsay Park, and you know, and I heard all these stories about people going through systemic sexism. And I remember like going to Lindsay and other feminists saying like, oh God, like this is so great. Like these terms you're using, this describes what happened to me. And instantly like, no, no, wrong. No, they didn't happen to you. You have power and privilege. And even if they did happen, even if it's real, by talking about it, you are trying to recenter it onto you. Thus, you are a sexist asshole piece of shit. Like,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, and like, and actually, like, I've experienced this stuff. Oh, you know, and that's the thing is like, you know, because at that time when Lindsay said, you know, oh, patriarchy hurts men too. Like, I got the weird impression from her when she said that feminism, despite its name, was actually interested in deconstructing sexism in general, and that it was not a gender supremacist movement interested only in advancing the cause of women at the
Well,
expense of men.
to be fully fair, there are some factions of feminism that do try to get consistent with that, but
Yeah,
feminism's factioned off now. That
but that's the thing. Like, I mean, when you get to that point, I mean, I remember years ago having this conversation with my sister, because like, you know, if you do the mott, if we just take the mott part of feminism, what do we need it for? Being a feminist today is like being an abolitionist today.
that's all the ultimate point of all this stuff. I mean, being a civil rights activist today is marching on Selma today, and
Yeah.
actually somebody called it several years ago. They called it Selma envy.
It's like sitting down at the front of the bus. Like,
Yeah,
wow. Oh,
I'm gonna
wow.
sit in front of the bus.
I'm going to sit
Take
in front of the bus and take that civilization.
Take that. Yeah. They were calling it Selma envy for a couple years, but Douglas Murray has that description of St. George in retirement. And the but James Lindsay also points out too, so much of the stuff is how to the same way Kaepernick needs to say slavery is still going today. It really is how to keep it alive. It's the trick on how do we keep it alive because we
Yeah.
don't want it to go away because it's useful for so many different political or
Yeah.
financial reasons.
Yeah, no, 2019 was the like all-time low for police shootings in Los Angeles. Right?
You know?
And how come and 2020 was the year that it became the single most critical issue in
But
America?
it's the same concept. So they
Yeah.
got to keep it alive because they got to keep their trillion-dollar industry alive of being an
Yeah.
activist. You can never trust somebody whose livelihood depends on curing a problem. Is one of the there's some sort of better phraseology for that, but
Yeah.
it's kind of an old trope. But I would put Delin right in that same ballpark. You know what I mean? I do not think that he wants a cure to his problem. He wants to be the leader of the
Yeah.
continued problem.
I don't know why it popped into my mind, but just thinking about like, what if Tony Timpa's mom wanted to come out and talk about police brutality? How would the
Probably has, and we haven't
and,
heard of it.
and that's what I was just wondering. Like, did she say something that's just been crushed? Because you think is like, you know, you'd think that the conservatives would take that up if she was being simply ignored. But I also kind of, I mean, first of all, I don't even know if Tony Timpa's mom is alive. I don't know anything about it, but just in general, like the idea of like if Tony Timpa's relatives wanted to make a big deal out of that, which they have every right to do, every reason to do it, but like in this climate, why would you expose yourself to that? You know, because like you know that by bringing up Tony Timpa, you're not trying to say that this isn't about race, you know, like that it's not as simple as that. Like, no, you're trying to recenter the conversation and detract from our mission. Like, oh
Counterfactuals are verboten.
yeah.
No counterfactuals to
Yeah,
our
well, like that thread you sent me of all of the black people who
successfully defended
yeah,
our.
successfully argued self-defense. All of the
Mhm.
black people who successfully argued self-defense and recent history, and it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And this isn't a direct reply to somebody saying no white person would ever get acquitted on or no black person would ever get acquitted on self-defense.
It's the same issue, but it's become common in society nowadays. Like we know it happens with the just the simple fact of like how many white people get shot every year, just along with black people in cop situations. Just this week, I come across it in my regular life because a friend of mine was joking that he was smoking weed, and they're gonna drug test me for my new job, so I can't smoke weed, and then he makes a joke. Oh, it's okay, I'm white, so you shouldn't. And my whole thing is I've been in HR forever and ever. The joke is supposed to have some truth to it, so it's comedy, like ha
Yeah.
ha, ha yeah, it's what I I know my numbers of people that I've seen get terminated for using marijuana on a job since I've worked in mostly white areas. you know, it's 1,000 to 1 in my actual personal history with that. It's just the random common joke nowadays. It must be
Yeah.
true.
No, like I had just I worked the other day. One of the reps, just I don't even remember what it was about, but just said something about like, oh, there's a black man's chance in court, a black man in court's chance in hell of that happening. It's like, what the
It's
fuck
all
are you talking
religious
about?
narrative, man.
Like,
It's
what
all
the
religious.
yeah. And I mean I don't know. The communist at work. This is one of my favorite things. Communist at work is that I was in the break room looking at my phone, and I'm the kind of creep that subscribes to the people that publish um, police body cam because I'm actually really really invested in having good police, and so I actually have for years ever since Ferguson. I have probably watched hundreds of hours of police incident, mostly shootings. And I'm watching the latest police incident, and it's a video of a guy in handcuffs being kicked in the head by a policeman. And I'm watching it with the volume off, and I go, "Oof, that guy's going to jail." And one of my coworkers says, "Oh, what are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, it's this video of a cop kicking a guy in the head." And the communist says, "Police are never get in trouble for any of this." I'm reading the description. The cop is currently in jail awaiting charges. Like, it's just like, oh, it never happens. Except for every
Yeah.
goddamn time, except for all of the dozens and dozens of videos I can show you with the links that show that the guy's in trouble, he went to prison, all this shit, but it never happens. It never happens.
Or the other issue that in all those same years that like more police killed by black men than black men were killed by police, and
Yeah.
I remember bringing that sort of thing up to this girl that I was dating, and I was just talking about, have you ever watched like any of the videos of when it does go bad and somebody's suddenly shooting and firing on a police officer? You know that each police officer who goes through those things watches those videos in training. And she said that's the problem. They shouldn't see those videos. They shouldn't they shouldn't be aware of of the dangers they're facing,
Oh
you
yeah.
know.
I mean that's one of the big gaslighting things going on right now is that people really pretend like police procedure is all just arbitrarily created so that cops can get away with shit. You know,
Well,
and
that's
it's just so stupid. Because like I
okay.
mean, one of the things that like just a couple years ago. I mean, what was it? No, it was last year in Utah. In Utah, just down the street from here, what was it? The 13-year-old kid with autism got shot by cops. Um, you know, and the whole narrative, everybody's like, why would you even send a policeman? It's a 13-year-old boy with autism. Why would you even send the cops? Why would they even consider that a threat?
It's his
And I was like,
mom.
well, but it's like, yeah, because his mom called and said he's making threats and he has a history of violence. And like, and that's things like, I know that I've been in America for the last 40 years, and I know that all of the people around me have been in America for the last 40 years, and they had genuinely asked this question: why are the police responding to a 13-year-old kid with autism, who has a history of making threats, who has a gun? Because sometimes 13-year-old boys with autism with a violent history and a history of making threats carry those threats out. It's called school shootings, you morons. That's why the police respond like that. You
Every single
idiots.
situation. Um, there was another one. That's one of the things I was actually one of the times I disagreed with Lindsay Hansen Park. There's some video of some shooting in Salt Lake of this guy who attacked some other man with a broomstick, but it was a night and the guy got shot. A police officer was there. You can see the video. The guy was holding up the gun saying stop, 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 and the guy goes and attacks him with the broomstick. Well, the problem is it was in the dark. The broomstick was like broken in half and it was silverish. You couldn't tell it wasn't like some knife. It
Yeah.
looked like it was some knife he was going after him with.
And it is possible to kill someone with a broken stick.
Yeah, but even still, it looked like a knife to me. It's like,
Yeah.
and then she was like throwing a tantrum about it and saying this is outrageous, well, and trying to. I mean, there's been this eagle eye on everything of trying to turn everything into a 5 alarm fire for riots. The past
Yeah.
couple years.
But that's the
But
thing is like I have watched so many damn police videos, and that's the thing is like because I can show all of the counterfactual cases of a million different kinds, but obviously like they don't want to know any of that. It's just simply not interesting to them to know about.
well, beyond not interesting, because so one of the things that happened. To talk about like James Lindsay's very smart people in the middle who will kind of like back up some of the stuff. Like I had another acquaintance or friend who put up a Facebook post that said, "I guess police can just kill people at will now. I guess that's just that's the world we're living in. They can just go kill people." And so me and like an autistic matter or something will say, "No, that's not the world we're living in." And then a very smart person will pop in and be like, "Why are you picking on him?" I mean, like
Yeah.
there's always like this issue of like, yeah, we're the trolls for saying no, nuh-uh,
Yeah.
and
No, that's one of those. That's
they're
one of
saying these hyperbolic, insane things. My brother's a police officer, like that. Those types of comments do possibly play into creating stochastic terrorism, which is the concept of you put something out in the ether and it becomes such a trope that like now any sort of police officer is pulling you over, people are going to think their only hope is to start blasting and
Yeah.
firing
Well, it's like they tried to do that. They tried to do that with Trayvon Martin and hoodies when they tried to pretend that the hoodie had something to do with Trayvon Martin getting shot. Just the mere fact that he wore a hoodie,
man,
and
that's speaking of that one, like that one I sucked in the normie, like
oh
that one
yeah,
I didn't know about until years later. Yeah.
that one the next day I saw the pictures of the wounds on the back of James Zimmerman's head, and I was like, huh, what's
Well, this
up with
isn't a
that?
time frame. I wasn't paying attention that hard, but like it wasn't until a long time later. I had no idea just from sucking in just general at that time frame that I didn't watch all the news. I once again, it was around Kavanaugh that I started saying, "Holy crap, I got to look at every side here because I didn't realize how much I'm getting lied to left and right."
Yeah, I
But
figured out Zimmerman almost. I mean, like I wasn't sure because a lot of the facts weren't out until the trial, but like just it was just one of those things where it's like, wait a second, I saw the photograph, like somebody published it.
I
I'm
had
like,
no
okay,
idea he'd been in a fight even. I had no clue.
no, because the media told the story about
Yeah.
how Trayvon Martin was a kid who was doing nothing wrong
I had no
whatsoever.
idea how
Yeah,
big he was at that time. I had no
yeah.
idea. I thought he was
Oh
the
yeah.
picture of the little baby boy.
That's the other thing with like, that's the other thing about the 13-year-old thing. When I was 13, I was 6'2" and 220 pounds. Like,
Yeah, there's that one of like that kid getting shot in a park for
yeah,
having a gun, and they're like, "Oh, he's only the 13-year-old boy with like a toy
yeah.
gun in the
He's
park,"
just a
and then
little
like you see
boy.
the video of the thing, and he's like 6'3" and
Yeah,
in a
like that thing's
hoodie,
like
and you can't tell, and
when I was 13, I was as big. I was bigger than most men as a 13-year-old. Like, so yeah, but like they just want to play these dumb little games. Like, oh, you're just a 13-year-old boy with autism. What's the
and then
difference?
in that situation too, you can pull up that yes, that has unfortunately happened to a bunch of white kids too.
Yeah, yeah,
There's like
absolutely.
50 incidences of it.
Well, this is, I mean, tying this stuff together, because this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I have almost nobody to talk to about it because of the nature of the whole world we live in, and also most people aren't creepy enough like me to watch all of that body cam footage. But suicide by cop,
Oh yeah.
the the statistics I think seem to show, and then like just my own personal survey, white people are way overrepresented in suicide by cop. I don't know if anybody cares to look into that. Because like we are told by the Johns that like, oh, like, John Larson said that if you continue to draw a salary while working as a professor of
I had that
yeah,
clip.
we'll do that dance, but we'll save that one for later. But if you teach dance, and if you're in the theater department at BYU, you are
My
actively contributing to the death of
my
gay Mormon
friend's
teens.
wife, her dad is a biology professor there. She and her dad are never Mo's. They've never once been Mormon. He just has a job there as a biology professor. Now, according to John Larson,
He has blood on his
party
hands.
he's
He
party to
has blood on his hands.
homophobia and
Yeah, he has blood on his hands. So anyway, like I mean, that's another show I really want to do, is to try to break down what's actually up with the stats, but I don't know. But like, here is a situation where we like,
I can
hey,
tell you what the
here,
answer is.
here's
There aren't good stats,
yeah, that's what I know so far.
that'd be the thing we tease out.
But yeah, the thing's like, well, here's a situation like John and Lindsay, because you guys care so much about the things that are affecting society. Because you tell us, like, first, I mean, there's just the a priori assumption. It's not really a priori, but like just this assumption that, well, the gay Mormon kids are killing themselves at a disproportionate rate. First, there's that. Secondly, it's because of this. Like they've built the whole thing up and they're running with it now. But like, meanwhile, there's all this evidence that white men particularly are disproportionately killing themselves by inducing the police to do it for them. Now,
Is that a systemic problem?
I'm curious. Yeah, is that a systemic problem, John? Is it even worth looking into? Because it is for me, but I'm just one little guy by myself, and every time I bring it up, I'm told
There's
that
there's so
I'm
much
told, yeah.
bad data into it too, because I was mentioning to you this the other day that the whole invention of the world of sociology from the father of it, Durkheim, started from the concept of him noticing that suicide goes up as countries become more affluent and free. And that basic simple concept should let you know that there's something more to suicide than just pointing to like basic A to B to C like
Yeah.
reasons of why people go and do it. And announcing that these kids or whatever are just so you have a gay kid or a kid who's a transgender kid and they grow up in a Mormon world, to just announce that they do kill themselves. You don't have any sort of suicide note or explanation behind you. Just as announced, to assume that you can know. I mean, I think it's he's a psychologist, although I guess some sort of Kelly went into this a little bit on the Midnight Mornings podcast, that he avoids keeping his there's something he avoids so that he doesn't have to be held to a standard. But and though I do know that he tried to contest that on one of his shows, but I think it's psychological malpractice to go around announcing that you know for sure in a scenario like that happens, that you can say it's because of your Mormonism. Your Mormonism did that to that kid.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
not only you can't say that, obviously he doesn't know, but then like, because my question for them that they will never listen to me say is that like, I was a suicidal Mormon teen, and I was straight, and I only ever had sexual attractions that are considered culturally appropriate, people my own age, all that stuff. And I was suicidal just for having sexual attraction and masturbating. I had suicidal thoughts, and it was centered around my sexuality. What are you going to do about that, John? What's your answer to that?
Well, that's toxic. That's toxic masculinity patriarchy. They have an answer for that. Just get rid of the toxic masculinity patriarchy but the end of all that, it's like you think about all the reasons in the world that persons might commit suicide in any given moment or something. It could just be like that they're in a dark place, but heck, it could be they lost a boyfriend like that week or something. They lost a girlfriend and then they got over in their heads about it and then just had some pills, and then maybe if they were alive, maybe if they got through that moment and they were alive the next day, they wouldn't have done it. I mean, there's so much about suicide to go and start using it like you can declaratively know that an entire population of religious people should change their entire theology because 30 kids 30 kids might have committed suicide for it. They were
Yeah.
like, I just imagine like them sitting there reading the proclamation to the world, like, the proclamation of the world was no gays. Wait, it doesn't say no gays. I just didn't see any in there. Well, that's it for
Yeah.
me. Like I'm out of here, you know. But I'm not downplaying that. I'm more than positive that Mormonism uh, made many of them dislike themselves.
Geez, I mean, I've got a friend. I mean, okay, these guys are still going on about the gay reparative electroshock therapy in the 70s, which was evil. We should talk about that stuff.
We talked about it yesterday a little bit.
But
I do think it was evil, but I also think that people get hyperbolic about what it was.
I have a friend who is
I have a
perfectly
friend who
straight who went through the reparative porn masturbation therapy that's going on at BYU to this day. Have you heard about any of this stuff?
is
Like,
current day. So
yes, it's
I
current day,
looked up.
and there's more than like I've heard multiple, like I've heard anecdotes of it actually happening, and multiple people, men seriously considering going to Mexico and having their junk cut off. You know, and there's
Wow.
straight men in the church today. Like, and I mean, you know, one of these guys. I mean, he talked at a Sunstone about it, and like, I went to see him and talk about it at Sunstone. I had no idea any of this went on. I didn't know it went on with him. I had no idea this was going on.
So
But it's happening to straight men. So who gives a?
I did look up and I saw that there's people who do still choose and use electroshock therapy to this day, and
Oh, so they
it's
want to.
made a little bit of like a resurgence among different groups. But I watched a documentary on the whole thing, and it went the same as my friend described to me. I had a friend who was put through it. My friend was also straight. He was put through it because he'd had a sexual encounter. He was young. He was like 10 or 11, and he had a sexual encounter with a girl younger than him. I don't think it was even full sex. It was kind of like a you show me yours, I'll show you mine type thing. And the person's parent found out about it and brought it to the bishop, and then he was put through this thing, and he described it all to me, and it was like the same way these other people described it in this documentary, is like people kind of put some hyperbolic belief around it that's like Frankenstein getting shocked, you know what I mean?
It's like
it's,
waterboarding level of torture. Like,
it's not even that. You can choose like the level of shock that it is, the person who's in the thing. Some
yeah.
people choose for it to go harder because they want it to be a stronger reaction, but it's
They call
basically
that
just
they call that the Mel Gibson setting.
But yeah, it's just basically Pavlovian action. Like the lightest setting of it, the setting that he told me that he had on it is kind of just like a
They
reminder
call
that
that
you're.
it,
It's
it
like
goes from it goes from John DeLynn all the way up to Mel Gibson.
yeah.
You get the milk toast, like it might not even be on.
Oh gosh. Um.
It's just John DeLynn in the room scolding you and asking for money.
No, what are you doing? That's super racist. Super racist. The that would be a good like implicit bias test. Like whichever way you look, it might be John DeLingo. Super racist. Super racist. Super like you look like they show you two pictures. If you look at the wrong one, super racist.
You're super
Super
racist.
racist.
Super
But
racist.
the no, the current that he had, it was just like a reminder or a notice that that his genitalia was getting a reaction to an image. You know, it was like
Hmm.
Pavlovian completely. You know, it wasn't like a type shock. You know,
Yeah.
and you could choose the level that you want. And I watched the documentary on it, and the people in the documentary, they admitted that it was that level too. Now, some people also had the option to choose to become like kind of like a Clockwork Orange thing to become
Yeah.
nauseous. They had
Yeah.
yeah, I would not have chosen that route for me, but at the same time too, all of it, what's torturous and evil about it is that people felt or thought they had to go do that, but
Yeah.
all of it was voluntary. Like every single one of them
Yeah.
said they had a choice to stop the next day. Most of them said they stopped after one or two tries or something like that,
Yeah.
and nobody was forced, like sitting there forced to go through it and forced to get these like it was. But the evil part of it is to make is that people thought they were broken in such a way that they had to go do some drastic thing to make a change, and that's
Yeah, which is like
torturous.
that's what's going on with the masturbation scene, the porn masturbation thing in Utah County. Is that like, that's things. And I went to a Sunstone and I listened to multiple people talk about how like they were seriously considering having their genitals removed because they're like, nothing will help me, nothing will save me, and they were straight. They were straight, John. They were straight, Johns. So why
But
don't you
you're not
care about
allowed
that?
to say that you had a difficult or hard time as hard as them.
Well, oh, that's right, because they are at the top of society, and all of civilization is structured around straight white men.
Yeah. So there's I mean, because I think so much of what the problem of the Marxist world is that they have to stratify everything into oppressor and oppressed, and the truth of reality is there's there's so many people in that oppressor class who are not having a great life. You know what I mean? That's the point of it. You know, and although they'll kind of try to like say some stuff to it of like Dallin H. Oaks is also part of the system and he's a victim of it too. Victims upon victims upon victims, but um we know when it comes right down to it, if it's time to put them against a wall, they'll put them against a wall. But the so much of my experience of being Mormon is also beating myself up about things that were just truths about myself of being a male who is straight who had problems with masturbation or pornography or something like that. Or there's a whole other world, like that I've been in the bodybuilding world for a long time. You cannot tell me that there's not similarities in the dysphoria of a bodybuilding world, dysmorphia of a bodybuilding world, and the dysphoria of a trans world,
Yeah,
And people will be, well, it's different, it's different. No, there's people messing up their lives, screwing up their bodies, doing insane, extreme things because they have an image in their head that they are supposed to look different than what's actually there. It's very, very similar, and
yeah,
but nope, you're not allowed to make a comparison like that because but it's also perfectly easy to say that people in that world, some people get benefits or do fine even though they're on some level dysmorphic. Some people
yeah,
the dysmorphia is so bad that it's life ruining,
yeah,
or
yeah.
leads to death and leads to suicide or leads to,
And broken families
and
and
broken
all that other stuff.
families and lost money and medical problems and um but no, can't make that comparison. But um, since I can make that comparison because I'm not an ideologue, I do think that everybody has dark nights of the heart about what their sexuality is, or
Yeah,
or even like what their physicality is, and I do think it
yeah.
is like we do understand it on some level or not. I mean, everybody does. We're all
Yeah,
trying to work out this world in an integrated way, having to deal with that we have flesh bodies and it sucks and is hard.
yeah. Like just yesterday, an argument with my little sister. And it's funny because, like, we're arguing about feminism, and it always comes down to the stupid shit, that the mott part of the feminism that nobody's actually arguing about. But she mentions like, oh, like my first experience with sexism was when I was a little girl and I was jumping on the trampoline with a bunch of boys, and it was hot, and they took their shirts off, and then I took my shirt off, and they all said, ah, you can't do that, you're a girl. And she said, see, sexism, and I'm like, well, this is the problem though. Like, I haven't taken my shirt off in public since I was 12 years old. In large part due to all of the girls, including my sisters, who called me fat. Like, well, both of those things are true. But I don't go around saying that my experience is an example of how all of society is structured from the top down to benefit women at the expense of men. I don't go to that bizarre leap. Like, yeah, it is a little bit weird that little girls can't jump on a trampoline with their shirts off. It's weird that people put pressure on you. It doesn't mean that patriarchy is real any more than there's a matriarchy because I don't take my shirt off in public because I'm tired. I don't like people making fun of me. Like, like where did I get that body image stuff from? Women. Like, you know, like,
Well, I mean, but we all have it. I mean, being born in this
yeah,
world, you can deal with it.
exactly.
But
Yes, exactly. And the fact is, it's life, right?
Adam Carolla once put this thought out, and I think it's a true thought, and it's just about pain. And then he said, "What if you've already felt like 100% pain? What if you've already felt a 10? You know what I mean? Just by living long enough, you
Yeah.
feel what a 10 is. Even 10 as strong as whatever will kill you one day, because that's just how much pain goes to. That's just how high the dial goes to. And I think bringing that back to like psychological issues, there's so much in John DeLin's, the clinical psychologist. Well, I don't think he's clinical, but maybe it is. But
Does he have a practice?
no, that's part of the thing that I think he had to do a certain amount of hours, like in residency or some whatever that's
Well,
called.
I
But
mean, like, but Delin is a psychologist in the way Dr. Fauci is a medical professional doctor,
yeah,
right?
he's
He's
not practicing like
he
that.
doesn't
No.
practice. He just mouths off about shit.
Yep. So what I'm saying is like psychological issues. Like, what's a 10 in a psychological issue, or a 2 in a psychological issue?
Yeah.
Somebody could have a psychological issue about their lost teddy bear that is a stronger feeling than I've ever had in my life, and to go around like feeling like you can rank what sort of problems people are going through by identity
Oh yeah.
is just ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
beyond ridiculous. I mean, it's cruel.
It's evil,
It's evil. And
and it's
it,
the basis of our society right now.
it's the
It's the
basis of our
predominant.
society. It's the
It's
basis
the
of
predominant. Yeah. It's the predominant
continually
narrative.
creating and making sure there's problems between people, and disagreements, or lack of ability to try to, or find yourselves an academic reason why you can denigrate or look down upon any like,
Yeah. No. The Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy,
yeah,
and that happened in my life.
or
You
I mean, I
know?
think one of the things, this my other friends, his grandma said this, is like, if you got all your if like everybody like brought their problems out onto like a square, and we all set our problems out in front of us, and you got to look at the other person's problems, which ones would you take if you're just looking at the problems? You know what I mean? And he said
Yeah.
almost all of us would just pick our own problems right back up and take them back, because we don't, and that's true of like, if you think about like who Trump is, you know what I mean? And people might think, oh, that's the most privileged life on earth. What of any person wants Donald Trump's life? Who wants to sign up to be born into that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you act like it's the he had privilege. He
Yeah.
had privilege because he lives in a big building. Like, I don't think Donald Trump had privilege being born into that universe of whatever his
Yeah.
existence is. I would
Well, no. I
hate it.
mean, and then like the other thing going on right now is that they say like Kyle got away with it.
Yeah.
Like his life is ruined. His life is ruined.
I
He,
saw somebody, one of the funnier memes I saw, it said he's Kyle Rittenhouse sentenced to 45 years of CPAC appearances. But
That's probably true. Because I mean, I already had this out. Like, what does he do? Like, his dream supposedly was to be a cop. That's over.
yeah,
Military? Nope, can't do that.
not with the
Like,
entryism of military right
yeah,
now.
and
We talked about entryism before we started. But
like who's gonna hire him? Like, what career can he go into? Like, what else can he do other than be a TV pundit now? Like, and that's the thing is like, and it's the left that's putting him there.
yeah.
Like, and they want him there. The last thing the left wants is for Kyle Rittenhouse to go off and live a quiet, happy life.
Well, maybe he'll. Well, I bet you. You ask me, I bet you that guy, like, something might happen to him. It really might. But
Well, yeah. I mean, like, look, the guy who shot Michael Brown in Ferguson, like, despite 5 investigations showing that shooting was entirely justified, and all that cop did that day was his job. Like, he lives in hiding. He lives in hiding, and he subsists on donations from friends and family.
it's
Like,
unreal. But Kyle might get some money if he goes and
Yeah,
some
no,
defamation suits.
I think
So.
like the part where like especially everything they said while he was still 17, that's got to count for more. Like I think, I mean, I thought that was part of what went into the Covington kids. Like it's one thing to just to tell these lies about anything, but like you're lying about children, like that's up, that's double up. Yeah,
I
I
bet
hope.
you, because I saw somebody talking about how to go get the money from it, and there's probably stuff where they can settle out of court for something like $250,000 here and there. I bet you a lot of those places calculated in that they'll pay that out. Like
Yeah, that's not
if
surprising.
we settle out of court and it's only $75,000, think of how much hay we make.
Yeah,
That's just like hiring another person to allow us to just
it's a
say
couple
this
of
how we want to say this for ratings over the
it's a couple of
past.
ad spots. It's the
Yeah.
cost of a couple of ad spots. Like maybe I wonder. This thing's like I hope that like there's justice and these people are actually held to some kind of account. And I don't even necessarily mean punishment. Like I've said, like my fantasy is to see, like the editor in chief of the New York Times on the stand explaining
I
why
think they had to do that for Covington
Covington.
kid. I think they did. I think there was some admission.
Yeah, I mean, because like obviously like like TYT Anna Kasparian, like the only people who think that their new show is Anna Kasparian and Cenk Uyghur. I don't think anybody else is like takes them seriously at all. I mean, some sort of passively pretend to, but like I mean, it seems like the CNNs, the MSNBCs of the world need to account for this. Anyway, we're 3 hours.
Yeah, we should call it good. I'll probably chop
Okay.
this up into a couple anyway.
Alrighty.
So
Well, maybe that's usable.
yeah, I think so. But I mean, I'll listen back. I kind of hope that because sometimes with the mics, you don't know that it didn't sound good until you listen back. But
No, yeah.
I think it'll be good. We'll
Well,
see. But
good practice.
Jonathan told me there's a way to alter the mics. But yeah, there's like 50 things that we talked in this. That's part of the problem. I was saying it in the thing yesterday is like we've been kind of sitting in the quiet waiting for so long, for so many years to talk about the stuff. We have too much to talk about, and it's like hard to reel in. And any single one of them could have been its own 30-minute podcast. You know what I mean? And there's 1,000 more of them. But maybe I can chop this up into a bunch of things. But even a bunch of things we mentioned are things that we should go into more detail about. So
And also, the cat just barely showed up, and cats are internet gold.
yeah, why did they? Usually cats are like there in the way the whole time.
Oh, she was sleeping this whole time. She just woke up.
I didn't know cats like to hug ever.
No, this is about it. Like, it's when I'm in this. It's weird. If I'm sitting in this chair, she comes and does this.
All right.
Cool. Alrighty. Shut her down.